Gu Qian fell for a cocktail waitress and was determined to dump me, his genius researcher fiancé. In my past life, I loved him. To secure his inheritance, I urged him to cut ties with that bar girl. Little did I know they'd stage 99 dramatic episodes of her fleeing and him chasing after her. Their child went missing in the chaos, leaving the waitress infertile for life. 5 years later, after taking over the Gu Empire, he crushed me to death with a 100-carat diamond on the eve of his billion-dollar wedding to that waitress. He can't stand the sight of you, he spat. A life for a life. The only place you belong is down there, serving our child as a maid. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day he publicly humiliated me by calling off our engagement. I, Gu Qian, would never marry some boring woman who spends all day holed up in a laboratory. The light from the crystal chandelier was harsh, and Gu Qian's voice, amplified by the microphone, filled every corner of the banquet hall. He stood on the stage, pointing at me, his lips curled in undisguised disgust and contempt. The one I love isn't she. She's pure and kind-hearted, like a delicate daughter vine that needs care and protection. Not you, Shenanxian, a so-called genius who's as cold as ice and only knows how to fiddle with data and test tubes. 1. Behind him stood Lin and she, the woman clutching his sleeve in her delicate white dress with red-rimmed eyes, the bartender from Glamour nightclub who'd been haunting his thoughts. The room erupted in chaos. Shenanxian, the research prodigy from the Xing family, outshone by some cocktail waitress. Tisk, rumor has it she nearly worked herself blind for months on Gu Qian's new energy project. And for what? She's not even that pretty, always wearing a sour expression. How could she compare to Lin's charm? Men always fall for women who know how to play their cards right. The Xing family has completely lost face this time. Countless eyes, pitying, scornful, gloating, pierced through me like needles. I stood frozen, still clutching the champagne meant to celebrate the project's success, my fingertips turning icy cold. This scene feels all too familiar, in my past life, right here under these same judgmental gazes. I begged him desperately not to break off our engagement, pleaded for the sake of his inheritance, for the dignity of both the Gu and Xing families, urging him to leave Lin and she. What I received in return was his escalating humiliation. Their 99 acts of she flees, he pursues farce, and the child lost by accident, blamed on me, that left Lin and she infertile for life. It was 5 years later, on the eve of his takeover of the Gu Corporation and his billion-dollar betrothal to Lin and she, when that 100-carat diamond was hurled at my forehead. He never wants to see you again. A life for a life. The only place you belong is serving our child in the afterlife. A dull throb seemed to resurface at my temple, the memory of that cold, unyielding touch and the despair of life slipping away etched deep into my soul. I drew a soft breath and lifted my head, meeting Gu Qian's smug gaze, fully expecting me to break down in tears. But instead of the anguish and disarray he anticipated, my face held only an icy calm. Finished, I spoke, my voice quiet yet strangely cutting through the room's clamor, silencing it for a moment. Gu Qian froze, his brow furrowing. Shenanxian, why are you pretending to be so calm? I know you're madly in love with me, but feelings can't be forced. I cut him off directly, took out my phone from my clutch bag, dialed a number right in front of him, and put it on speakerphone. Ring, ring. After a few rings, a deep, authoritative male voice came through the speaker, echoing through the silent banquet hall. And Xian, calling at this hour. Do you have good news about the project? It was Chairman Gu Ting phone. Everyone held their breath, watching the sudden uncertainty flash across Gu Qian's face. I slowly curved my lips into a smile and enunciated each word with crisp clarity. Uncle Gu, the project was a great success, but there's something more important we need to discuss now. Your son Gu Qian publicly announced his intention to marry some bar hostess from a nightclub. He unilaterally called off our engagement, claiming he'd rather have that cocktail waitress than me, a daughter of the Xing family and the future matriarch of the Gu legacy. There was a 2-second silence on the other end, followed by a tension so thick it seemed to travel through the phone line. Where is he? Put him on the phone. Gu Qian's face went pale, and he instinctively moved to snatch the phone away. I sidestepped, my gaze sweeping over the guests whose expressions shifted in an instant, watching their faces transform from mockery to shock, then to speculation. So what happened? Then, I dropped the bombshell. That won't be necessary, Uncle Gu. Since Gu Qian insists on humiliating me and our Xing family by bringing in a barmaid, I demand a change in the marriage arrangement. I paused, feeling my heart pound fiercely in my chest. Savoring the thrill of my first counterattack since my rebirth, I agreed to the marriage alliance, but the groom must be changed to your eldest son, Gu Qi. the heir of the Gu family, my voice was resolute, carrying undeniable force, should also be replaced by someone else. The entire banquet hall erupted into chaos. What? Shenanxian is going to marry that vegetative patient Gucci. She's lost her mind. The shock must have driven her insane. Gucci has been bedridden for 3 years. There's no telling if he'll ever wake up. She's condemning herself to a living widowhood. Humph. All out of spite. Is it worth it? Will the Xing family even agree? Gucci Yan burst into hysterical laughter as if he'd just heard the joke of the century, pointing a finger at my face. Shenanxian, have you lost your mind? Marry my brother, that living corpse. Ha, you'd rather chain yourself to a vegetable than admit you lost to Enshi. You're nothing but a pathetic fool. Linshi nestled into Gu Qian's arms at just the right moment, looking at me timidly with tears still glistening in the corners of her eyes. Miss Sheng, how could you? Young Master Qi is already in such a pitiable state. How could you still take advantage of him? I stared at this wretched pair, the memory of their hypocritical performance in front of me from my past life overlapping with the present scene, making me so nauseated I nearly retched. On the other end of the line, Gu Tingfeng's voice sounded again, carrying a trace of imperceptible caution and a certain calculated flexibility. And Xian, are you certain? You know Qi's condition. I'm certain, I replied without any hesitation. Compared to an heir who's infatuated with a barmaid, can't separate personal feelings from business, and might lead the Gu family into unpredictable risks. A stable marriage alliance that also secures the full support of the Xing family is the better choice for Gu Corporation, isn't it, Uncle Gu? I went straight for the jugular. Gu Tingfeng is a businessman, one who places immense value on profit and family reputation. Gu Qian's actions today have crossed his bottom line. Sure enough, Gu Tingfeng fell silent. That silence spoke volumes. It was as good as an admission. Gu Qian's laughter cut off abruptly. In disbelief, he yelled into my phone. Dad, don't listen to her nonsense. She's just trying to get back at me. Shut up. Gu Tingfeng's furious roar came through the receiver. Gu Qian, get your ass back here right now, and bring that tramp with you. The call was abruptly disconnected. The dial tone buzzed mockingly, stinging Gu Qian and Lin Enchi's faces like a sharp slap. Gu Qian's face turned ashen, his eyes burning into me with a venomous glare that seemed ready to tear me apart. Lin Enchi's face was filled with terror as she tightly gripped Gu Qian's arm, sobbing quietly. Without another glance at them, I walked straight toward the banquet hall entrance. As I passed, the crowd automatically parted to make way. The looks in their eyes had shifted from initial sympathy and disdain to shock, curiosity, and even a hint of awe. Oh my god, Shenanxian is actually going through with it. That's a ruthless move, cutting the problem off at the root. Gu Qian is in deep trouble now. Chairman Gu values his reputation above all else. Could it be? The Gu family is about to face a major shakeup. I stopped at the doorway, not turning back, my voice low but clear enough to be heard by the deathly silent crowd behind me. Second young Master Gu, don't forget to inform your innocent and kind-hearted daughter Flower. Get ready to call me sister-in-law. The room fell into a dead silence. Gu Qian snapped back to reality and snarled at me. Shenanxian, have you lost your mind? Marry my brother. He's been bedridden for 3 years. He's practically a living corpse. Are you really going to condemn yourself to a living widowhood just to get back at me? Lin Enchi tugged at his sleeve, her eyes brimming with tears. Qian, don't be like this. Miss Xing might just be acting on impulse. I couldn't be bothered to watch their little performance, so I turned and walked away. Stop right there. Gu Qian tried to block my path. I turned my head and shot him an icy glare. Second young Master Gu, if you lay a finger on me again, I can't guarantee you'll be allowed into the Gu Corporation building tomorrow. His hand froze midair. I had evidence of his previous project's misconduct. Last time I went easy on him, but this time I won't hold back. The expressions of the surrounding guests shifted, from amusement to cautious assessment. Is Shenanxian actually serious? Does she have something on Gu Qian? Looks like second young Master Gu has met his match. I ignored the chatter and left directly. The next day, Gu Tingfeng called me personally. And Xian, I've thought about what you said yesterday. Qi, it's true this is unfair to you, but if you insist, the Gu family welcomes you. I knew exactly what he was scheming. The Xing family behind me, and the research project in my hands, were far too important to the Gu Corporation. Trading a comatose son for a powerful ally and stable succession rights, he was getting a bargain. I don't feel wronged, Uncle Gu, I said, but I have 2 conditions. Boom. First, after I marry Gu Qi, all the shares and assets under his name will be managed by me. Second, Gu Qian must step away from the core operations and be assigned to an overseas branch. He is not to return without explicit summons. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. After hanging up, I let out a cold laugh. Gu Tingfeng truly was ruthless, willing to cast aside his own youngest son without a second thought when it served his interests. The news spread like wildfire, causing an uproar. Gu Qiyan stormed into my home, his eyes bloodshot. Shenanxian, how ruthless can you be? You want to exile me. In your dreams. I sat on the sofa, leisurely flipping through Gucci's medical report. It's not exile. I'm giving you a chance to fly away with your one true love. What? Not willing? Or are you just too attached to the Gu family's wealth and luxury? He was left speechless, his face turning pale and then flushed with anger. Lin Shi followed him in, standing behind him and speaking in a fragile voice. Miss Sheng, please let Qi Yan go. It's all my fault. I looked up, my gaze sharp as a blade. Of course it's your fault. Who else's would it be? Her face turned pale, on the verge of tears. And one more thing, I added. From now on, please address me as Madam Sheng, or the young mistress. Gu Qiyan was trembling with rage, pointing at me. You think marrying my brother will bring me down? Let me tell you, as long as I'm in Gu Corporation, don't even think about gloating. Oh really? I chuckled lightly. Then you'd better make the most of your time and take a good look at the Gu Corporation building. Next Monday, you'll be reporting to the African branch. What? Gu Qiyan completely lost control. Impossible. My father wouldn't. The transfer order has already been issued. I cut him off. Personally signed by Chairman Gu himself. Would you like me to fax you a copy to see? He froze in place, as if all strength had been drained from him. Lin Shi panicked too, clutching him tightly. Qi Yan, Africa. I'm not going. It's so chaotic there. I'm terrified, watching the two star-crossed lovers clinging to each other. I couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. Don't want to go. I raised an eyebrow. Fine, announce right now that you're renouncing all inheritance rights from the Gu family, sever ties with them, and take your true love to work construction. I'll cancel your transfer immediately. Gu Qiyan stared at me with burning eyes, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. Of course he couldn't say it. How could he possibly give up the Gu family's wealth and status? It seems your love still needs money to sustain it, I said, standing up to show them the door. Have a safe trip. Don't bother seeing yourselves out. There are lots of mosquitoes in Africa. Remember to bring repellent. Gu Qiyan was dragged away by a sobbing Lin Shi. Not long after they left, I received a call from the butler of the Gu family's old residence, Miss Sheng, the young master. His finger just twitched. My heart skipped a beat as I clutched the phone. Gucci, are you waking up? A full 2 months earlier than in my previous life. It seems my rebirth has truly altered the course of events. A week later, Gucci and I held our wedding in a low-key ceremony. Gu Qiyan was still packed off on a flight to Africa, with Lin and Shi tearfully following along. At the wedding venue, only Gu Tingfeng and a few family elders were present. I stood beside the unconscious Gucci's bed in my wedding dress and completed the ceremony. No one had high hopes for this marriage, all waiting to see how long I, the fortune-bringing bride, would last. 3 days after the wedding, I moved into Gucci's villa and took full control of his affairs. His private lawyer and medical team were initially wary of me, but I quickly won them over with my sharp business acumen and an understanding of Gucci's condition that went far beyond the ordinary. I reviewed the last project Gucci handled before his coma, the acquisition of a prime piece of land with excellent prospects, currently stuck in a deadlock. In my past life, Gu Qiyan had managed to secure this tough deal and win the board's favor by using the follow-up plan he swindled from me. Now, he's completely out of the picture. I gathered the project team, pulled several all-nighters revising the plan, and personally met with key stakeholders. The resistance was intense. Many paid lip service while secretly waiting for me to fail. Madam, their lead negotiator is being extremely difficult and won't budge an inch. I've heard the second young master has been remotely coordinating from Africa to try and steal the deal out from under us. I set down my coffee cup, my gaze turning icy. Inform them I'll be there personally tomorrow at 3 p.m. Also, anonymously send Chairman Gu evidence of Gu Qian's back-channel dealings and his promises of improper benefits. The assistant was momentarily taken aback, then immediately carried out the orders. The next day, I arrived punctually at the negotiation room. The opposing party's representative was arrogant and raised every possible objection. Miss Sheng, it's not that I'm being difficult, but the terms your Gu group has presented simply lack sincerity. I directly switched on the projector and pulled up a document. Mr. Jean, that Eastern District plot you've been sitting on for 5 years. The zoning approval still hasn't come through, has it? Their expression shifted slightly. What if I told you that next month, the new subway route will be announced, and it happens to run right by your property? I smiled faintly while pulling up another set of data. Also, Your company's last quarterly financial report seems to have some discrepancies. Would you like me to put in a good word for you with the Securities Commission? Beads of sweat formed on their forehead as their confidence visibly deflated. Miss Xing. What are you implying? So here's the deal, either sign the contract on my terms, and we all walk away happy, or, my smile vanished, eyes sharpening. I guarantee that land of yours will never see the light of day. And your company might run into some complications. Half an hour later, the contract was signed. I walked out of the conference room with the signed documents. Just as Gu Tingfeng's furious call came through, that bastard Gu Qiyan, how dare he pull this stunt behind my back, and Xian, I owe you one this time, just doing my job, Dad, I said calmly. After hanging up, I knew Gu Qian's days in Africa were about to get much harder. As news of the project's success spread, opinions about me within the Gu Corporation began to shift. I never thought the young mistress actually had some real skills, far better than that second young master who only knows how to party at nightclubs. I turned a deaf ear to everything else. Every day, aside from handling official duties, I stayed by Gucci's bedside, reading financial news or simply sitting in silence. 2. The doctor said that talking more with the patient aids recovery. I didn't know if he could hear me. But I needed to speak, to talk about my plans, my hatred, my ridiculous past life. Gucci, you'd better wake up soon, I whispered, gazing at his sleeping profile. Watching your brother's downfall alone just isn't as satisfying. His finger twitched again. 2 months later, I had nearly complete control over Gucci's assets and secured my position on the Gu Corporation board. Gu Qiyan was struggling in Africa, with every attempt to return home thwarted by me, unable to endure the hardship. Lin and she began posting veiled, self-pitying content on social media, implying I had forced them out. Online trolls started pushing narratives accusing me of being a usurper with malicious intentions. I had my lawyer send a cease and desist letter directly to her inbox, complete with transaction records showing her extravagant shopping sprees in Africa using Gu Qian's supplementary card. Miss Lin, if you continue spreading nonsense online, the next document you receive will be a court summons. She immediately fell silent. Just when I thought Gucci would remain unconscious longer, I was working late in my study one night when the caregiver called in a panic. Madam, the young master, he's opened his eyes. My pen clattered onto the desk. When I rushed into the hospital room, the doctor was conducting an examination. Gucci leaned against the headboard, his face pale but his gaze strikingly clear and sharp, with the confusion and scrutiny of someone just regaining consciousness. His eyes swept over everyone present before finally settling on me. He stared at me for so long that the air itself seemed to freeze. Then, he furrowed his brow slightly, his voice hoarse and low from disuse. Who are you? I stood at the doorway of the hospital room, meeting his sharp, newly awakened eyes from a few steps away. The air grew still, the doctors and nurses held their breath. Who am I? I sneered inwardly, outwardly. I picked up the water glass beside me, walked naturally to the bedside, and handed it to him. Xinanxian, I said, looking straight at him and enunciating each word clearly. Your legal wife, the one currently managing all your assets, and who just shipped your good-for-nothing brother and his beloved bartender off to Africa. His hand, reaching for the glass, froze mid-air. The scrutiny in his eyes instantly shifted to shock, then deepened into intense contemplation. Gu Qiyan went to Africa. His voice was hoarse, laced with disbelief. Father signed the transfer order himself, I said flatly, as if commenting on the weather. He called off the engagement for some bar girl in front of the entire high society, humiliating both the Gu and Xing families. He had to pay the price. Gucci leaned against the headboard, sipping water slowly, but his gaze remained fixed on my face as if trying to see right through me. You did this. It wasn't a question, but a statement. The real credit goes to your brother and the moving love story with his true love. I gave a wry smile. I just gave it a little nudge in the right direction. He remained silent, the only sound in the hospital room being his soft sips of water. After a long moment, he set the cup down. How long was I out? 3 years and 4 months. I stated the precise number. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they held a cold, sober clarity. How is the company doing now? We secured the East City land plot you were eyeing before your coma. The core data for the new energy project your brother was in charge of is with me, and it's currently on hold. A few of the old foxes on the board are getting restless, but we can keep them in check for now, I reported succinctly, as if giving a routine update. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected me to be so well informed. You, he began, but the hospital door was abruptly thrown open. Gu Tingfeng rushed in, his face alight with excitement. Gee, you're really awake. What did the doctor say? It should have been a touching father-son reunion, but Gucci merely gave a faint nod. Dad, his gaze immediately returned to me, carrying an unmistakable intensity. I want to know everything that's happened over the past 3 years, every detail. Only then did Gu Tingfeng notice me, his expression complex, tinged with a barely perceptible wariness, and Xian has indeed been quite helpful during this time. Gucci responded, still looking at me. From now on, you report to me. Agreed. His tone was commanding. I raised an eyebrow, just as expected. The eldest son of the Gu family, even after lying in bed for 3 years, was no easy person to deal with. Fine, I met his gaze, but before I report, there's something that needs to be handled first. I pulled out my tablet, brought up a surveillance video, and handed it to Gucci. On the screen, Gu Qian was in his office at the African branch, hissing furiously at the person on the other end of the video call. I don't care how you do it, you must sabotage that project. Don't let that woman Xing'anqian have the satisfaction, and find a way to get me back. Gucci watched the video, his expression darkening by the second. Gu Tingfeng leaned in to look and immediately flew into a rage. That damn bastard. He just never learns his lesson. I calmly retrieved the tablet. Dad, Gu Qian is openly harming the group's interests and attempting to disrupt our domestic operations, according to company regulations. How should this be handled? Gu Tingfeng's face turned ashen. Gucci lifted his gaze, his eyes unfathomably dark. His voice carried the weakness of someone just awakened, yet each word was ice cold. Strip him of all positions in the overseas branches. Freeze all credit cards and dividend accounts under his name, without my permission. He is not to set foot outside the domestic headquarters. He looked at me, his gaze sharp as a blade. What do you think, madam? I smiled faintly, knowing this was his first test since waking up, and a show of authority. I began deliberately, meeting his intensely oppressive gaze. We can add one more point. Forward the evidence of his attempts to sabotage the project to all members of the board. A faint glimmer of something akin to approval flashed in Gucci's eyes. Granted, the single word carried undeniable finality. Gu Tingfeng's lips parted, but in the end, no words came out. I knew Gu Qian was finished. On the very day his own brother woke up, he was nailed to the pillar of shame. When the news reached Africa, Gu Qian trashed his office in a rage. Lin and she called from overseas, sobbing hysterically, her voice shrill. Xing'anqian, you vicious woman. Are you trying to drive us to our deaths? I held the phone away from my ear, waiting for her wailing to subside before speaking coldly. Miss Lin, instead of barking here, why not use your pure and kind charm to convince your man to work hard on that construction site in Africa and earn his keep? After all his cards are frozen now. The phone erupted with Gu Qian's furious roars and the sound of shattering objects. I hung up the phone, feeling thoroughly pleased. Gucci's recovery progressed at a staggering pace. In less than 2 weeks, he was already back on his feet, though his complexion remained pale. The commanding presence of a seasoned leader had fully returned. He began reclaiming core operations I had managed in his stead, executing decisions with ruthless efficiency that now carried an even sharper edge than before his coma. The old foxes on the board, who had been biding their time and even covertly feeding information to Gu Qian, immediately sensed the shift in winds. They promptly tucked their tails between their legs and noticeably increased their efforts to curry favor with me. I was more than happy to step back, relinquishing most of my authority while maintaining an iron grip on the new energy project and the core of Gucci's personal assets. This was stipulated in our prenuptial agreement, the bedrock of my security and standing. That day, I had just finished a video conference with Gucci, finalizing the plan to clean up the remnants of Gu Qian's forces. When the intercom phone rang, my secretary sounded a bit tense. Mr. Sheng, the front desk says, Ms. Lin and she is insisting on seeing you and refuses to leave until she does. She's drawn quite a crowd of reporters. I raised an eyebrow, with Gu Qian's cards frozen. Was she getting desperate? Send her up. A few minutes later, Lin and she burst into my office, looking haggard and completely devoid of the delicate, pitiful flower image she had maintained in the banquet hall. Her eyes were red and swollen as she pointed at me and started yelling, Xing'anqian, haven't you done enough damage to Qian? He's in Africa now, sick and without money to see a doctor. How can you be so vicious? I leaned back in my chair, slowly twirling my pen. If he's sick, why come to me? Go find his true love. Didn't you keep saying you love him and would do anything for him? Now's your chance to prove it. Whether you sell blood or a kidney, it's your choice. She trembled with rage. If you hadn't frozen his cards, how could you possibly not have money for medical treatment? I picked up her thread with a cold laugh. Lin and she, spare me the act. Gu Qian's base salary at the African branch is more than enough for a comfortable life there, whether he squandered it all himself or you blew it on luxury goods, you know the truth. Her face went pale, her eyes darting shiftily. I couldn't be bothered to waste more words on her. Pressing the intercom, I said, "Security, please escort Miss Lin out. From now on, don't let her into the building without an appointment, Shenanxian." "How dare you, Lin!" and she shrieked, lunging forward only to be restrained by security guards who arrived just in time. "You think I won't?" I stood up, walked over to her, and looked down at her from above. "And let me remind you, if you dare cause another scene at my company or spread any more false rumors online, I won't hesitate to make public that colorful client list from your time working at Allure." "Lin!" she screamed, cut off abruptly. The color drained from her face, and her eyes finally held genuine fear as she looked at me. The security guards dragged her out, and the office returned to silence. I sat back down in my chair and rubbed my temples. My phone vibrated, a text from Gucci, brief and to the point. "All settled. Yeah, father wants us to have dinner at the Gu residence tonight." My fingers paused over the screen. Dinner at the Gu mansion. Is Gu Tingfeng trying to mend our relationship, or is there something else going on? That evening, Gucci and I returned to the Gu family ancestral home together. The atmosphere was even more unsettling than I had anticipated. Gu Tingfeng sat at the head of the table, his expression grim. Seated below him, adorned in glittering jewels and straining to project the air of the lady of the house, was Lu Yuru, Gu Qian's biological mother, the woman who had clawed her way into this position through disgraceful means. When she saw Gucci and me enter, particularly noticing how he moved with his usual composure and an icy aura, the forced smile on her face instantly froze. "Chi, you're awake. What wonderful news," Lu Yuru said flatly, though her eyes held a venomous glint. "And Xian is here too. Please, have a seat." 3. Gucci didn't even bat an eye, pulling out the chair and sitting down directly. I followed suit, taking my seat with composure. At the dining table, Lu Yuru began making backhanded compliments, and Xian is truly capable. While Chi was in a coma these years, she managed everything inside and outside the household perfectly, not like our Qian, so straightforward, easily deceived, now drifting out there who knows how much hardship he's endured. As she spoke, she picked up a handkerchief to dab at non-existent tears. Gu Tingfeng frowned slightly but remained silent. I set down my chopsticks, looked at her, and smiled faintly. Aunt Lu is right, Gu Qian is indeed easily deceived. But it seems the one deceiving him is none other than his pure and kind true love, Miss Lin, and she, who had close relationships with countless customers while selling drinks at the nightclub. Lu Yuru's face instantly darkened. "How dare you spout such nonsense? Whether it's nonsense or not, Aunt Lu, you can go to Glamour and ask around yourself." Miss Lin was the star attraction there back in the day, with quite a few private patrons. "You might even run into some old acquaintances to catch up with," I said lightly, as if discussing the weather. "You," Lu Yuru's chest heaved with rage as she turned to Gu Tingfeng. "Sir, look at her. She's trying to drive us mother and son to our graves." Gu Tingfeng's face darkened as he slammed his glass down. "Enough. Can't even a meal shut you up." Gucci finally spoke in a measured tone, his voice devoid of warmth. "Father Qian's actions in Africa have severely harmed the group's interests. The board is deeply dissatisfied with him. If Aunt Lu continues to indulge him like this, I'm afraid he won't even last at the subsidiary company." Lu Yuru instantly fell silent, staring at Gucci in terror. Gu Tingfeng took a deep breath, clearly struck where it hurt. "I'm well aware of this matter. Let's eat." The meal concluded in a stifling atmosphere. As we left, Lu Yuru watched our retreating figures walking side by side, her eyes burning with such venom they seemed to drip blood. Once settled in the car, Gucci closed his eyes to rest, then suddenly remarked, "Your methods for dealing with Lu Yuru are far too gentle." I turned my head to look at him. He opened his eyes, his gaze icy and detached. "To kill a snake, you must strike its head. What she cares about most isn't Gu Qian, it's her status as Mrs. Gu and the wealth and luxury that come with it." I understood what he meant. I just hadn't expected him to be so merciless toward his own stepmother. "Understood." I nodded. It seemed it was time to give Lu Yuru some real trouble. Gucci closed his eyes again, the corner of his mouth curling up almost imperceptibly. "Just say the word if you need help." A few days later, I met with a private investigator and slid a stack of documents about Lu Yuru across the table to him. Focus on her financial transactions over the past 3 years, especially overseas accounts, and her private interactions with those so-called mahjong buddies of hers. The detective immediately understood the assignment and left promptly. Gucci was right. A woman like Lu Yuru, who clawed her way to the top, fears nothing more than losing her money and status. With Gucci Yen out of the picture, she'd definitely be scrambling to secure a safety net for herself. There's no way her hands are clean. Sure enough, within a week, the investigators sent over the initial findings. Not only had Lu Yuru been secretly taking kickbacks by exploiting her status as Mrs. Gu, but she had also funneled substantial assets overseas through underground banks. The real bombshell, however, was that one of her regular mahjong partners turned out to be a gigolo with a prior conviction for fraud. I held on to this evidence, biding my time. I was waiting for the right moment to strike. That day, the Gu Corporation held its quarterly board meeting. Gucci, the heir who had just awoken and swiftly taken control of the situation, was presiding. I attended in my capacity as both the holder of Gucci's proxy voting rights and the head of the new energy project. Midway through the meeting, as the discussion turned to an overseas investment proposal, a director who had always been close to Lu Yuru suddenly launched an attack. Gee. You've only just woken up, so you might not fully grasp the complexity of this project. I believe it would be safer to entrust the leadership to someone with more experience. For instance, we could ask Madame Lu to assist. She does have some overseas connections. Gucci didn't even lift his eyelids, just tapped his finger lightly on the table. I immediately caught his drift and cut the director off. Director Li, when you say experience, are you referring to the experience Madame Lu gained last year by secretly funneling 50 million in kickbacks through your nephew's company? The entire meeting room fell into a dead silence instantly. Chairman Li's face turned pale instantly. Shenanxian, that's a vicious slander. Unhurriedly, I pulled out several transaction records and contract copies from my folder and had my assistant distribute them to the board members. This is the fund flow documenting MS. Lu Yuru's receipt of kickbacks, with the handler being your own nephew. Chairman Li, should I submit more detailed evidence, including your nephew's company account books, to the supervisory committee? Chairman Li was drenched in sweat, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. The other board members looked at the irrefutable evidence in their hands with varied expressions. Their eyes filled with fear and apprehension as they glanced at me. Gucci finally spoke slowly, his voice devoid of any emotion. Director Li is getting on in years. It seems his energy is failing him, making him susceptible to deception. Effective immediately, he is relieved of all positions within the group and shall retire to enjoy his remaining years. With such casual indifference, a veteran was effortlessly cast aside. His gaze swept across the room. Anyone else have doubts about the project lead's capabilities, or my wife's competence? The conference room fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. No one dared utter another word. I knew Gucci was using me to establish his authority while making it clear to everyone Shenanxian was under his protection. After the meeting concluded, I returned to my office, and Gucci followed me in. You're quick, he remarked. Only because you reminded me, I said, pouring him a glass of water. He took it but didn't drink, looking at me instead. When are you planning to close in on Lu Yuru? Soon, I smiled. We need to let her transfer more assets first, the larger the amount, the heavier the sentence. He nodded, seemingly quite pleased with my ruthlessness. Just then, an urgent news alert popped up on my computer. Madame Lu Yuru of the Gu Group, suspected of massive embezzlement and illegal asset transfers, has been taken away by the police for investigation. The accompanying photo showed Lu Yuru being escorted by 2 female officers, her face deathly pale and her hair disheveled. Not a trace of her former high society elegance remained. I raised an eyebrow and looked at Gucci. You're doing. He took a slow sip of water and said, just happened to be convenient. Now I get it. He thought I was too slow, so he poured fuel on the fire, and did it in the most official, irreversible way possible, ruthless and absolute. With this, Lu Yuru is completely finished, and Gucci Yen has lost his last foothold overseas. My phone started vibrating like crazy. It was Gucci Yen calling from Africa, his voice hoarse and desperate. Shenanxian. It was you. You're the one who hurt my mother, you vicious snake. I won't let you get away with this. I'll haunt you from my grave. I hung up immediately and blocked his number. Finally, there was silence. Gucci set down the water glass and walked to the window, gazing at the bustling traffic below. We've mostly cleared out the nuisances. He turned around, backlit, his silhouette sharp and unyielding. Now it's time to focus on what really matters. What he meant by what really matters was taking complete control of the Gu conglomerate, and dealing with those enemies still lurking in the shadows. I knew that our marriage, which had begun with interests and revenge, was gradually transforming in a peculiar way into an unbreakable alliance. I walked over to him and stood by his side. What do you plan to do next? He turned his head to look at me, a faint, almost imperceptible smile flickering in his eyes. What do you think, my lady? The news of Liu Yuru's arrest struck the already turbulent Gu family like a massive rock crashing into deep, murky waters. Gu Tingfeng was so furious he nearly had a heart attack and was admitted to the hospital's intensive care unit. No matter how much he disliked Liu Yuru, she had been known as Mrs. Gu for nearly 2 decades. Now, with this scandal breaking out, the Gu family's reputation was completely tarnished. I went to visit him with a fruit basket and overheard him venting to his confidant outside the ward. Investigate, find out who leaked the information to the police. Was it that girl Shinanxian? The confidant stammered hesitantly. I pushed the door open and entered, wearing just the right amount of concern on my face. Dad, are you feeling any better? Gu Tingfeng's face turned ashen when he saw me, barely containing his anger. And Xian is here, he said through gritted teeth. He dismissed his confidant, leaving just the 2 of us in the hospital room. I was just as shocked about Aunt Lu's situation, I said calmly, setting down the fruit basket, but the evidence of her embezzling company funds and illegally transferring assets is undeniable. This is a major blow to the group's reputation. Our top priority now is to cut ties quickly and stabilize the stock price. Gu Tingfeng stared at me, his gaze sharp and probing, as if searching for any crack in my composure. Don't you have anything to say? Meeting his gaze squarely, I replied without hesitation, yes, I do. I believe we should issue a statement immediately to distance the group from Liu Yuru's personal actions. Either you or Qi should step forward personally to apologize and compensate the affected partners, doing everything possible to minimize the losses. Every word I said was perfectly reasonable and aligned with the company's interests, leaving him no room to find fault. Gu Tingfeng remained silent for a long moment before finally waving his hand wearily. Do as you say, let Qi handle it. All right, father, please get some rest. I turned and left. The moment the door closed behind me, a cold smirk curled at the corner of my lips. Cutting ties, apologies. This is only the beginning. Gu Qi acted faster than I had anticipated. He swiftly issued the severance announcement and personally met with the heads of several major partners. Employing a firm yet tactful approach that quickly stabilized the situation, even the few board members who had initially voiced concerns fell completely silent in the face of his formidable control. After a brief period of turbulence, the Gu conglomerate, a massive ship, steadily sailed into the course charted by Gu Qi at the helm. As for Gu Qiyan, after Liu Yuru's downfall, he completely vanished without a trace. Rumor has it he couldn't even last at the African branch. Ended up buried in debt, and disappeared with Lin and Shi as if they had evaporated into thin air. I didn't bother looking for them. A couple of strays aren't worth the effort. Sooner or later, they'll crawl out of the woodwork on their own. That day, while representing the Gu group at a tech summit, I had just signed a letter of intent for cooperation and stepped out of the meeting room. At a corridor corner, a familiar yet disheveled figure stopped me in my tracks. It was Lin He. She was gaunt and emaciated, wearing a cheap, crumpled dress. Her face was flushed with an unnatural redness, but her eyes were unnervingly intense, fixed on me with a piercing stare. Shinanxian, she rasped, her voice hoarse and desperate with a do-or-die madness. Give me the money, 5 million, or I'll expose everything. How you and Gu Qi conspired to harm Aunt Lu and drove Qian away. I have evidence. I stopped in my tracks, looking at her utterly desperate state, and could only find it laughable. Evidence? I raised an eyebrow. You mean those fabricated chat logs and transfer screenshots your con artist Boytoy gave you? Lin and Qi's pupils contracted sharply, all color draining from her face. You, how do you know? I know more than that. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only we could hear. I also know that Mr. Wang, the one you entertained at Club Allure, is currently facing legal trouble and needs someone to take the fall. Tell me, if I delivered you to him and said you're willing to shoulder all the blame, do you think he'd be grateful? 4. Lin and Qi's body began trembling violently, her gaze shifting from frenzy to pure terror. No, you can't. I can. I straightened up, brushing off non-existent dust from my clothes. Lin and Qi, get lost, if you show up in front of me again. Next time you won't get off with just a warning, you'll be enjoying free meals in prison. She collapsed to the ground as if all strength had drained from her body, utterly broken and desolate. I didn't spare her another glance and walked away. Such vermin aren't even worth my time to deal with. Back at the company, Gu Qi was waiting in my office. He was sitting in my chair, reviewing the latest progress report on the new energy project. Trouble? He asked without looking up. Just a fly. I swatted it away. I walked over and picked up another file. He closed the report and looked up at me, his gaze intense. We've got news on Gu Qiyan. I froze mid-motion. Where? Macau. He owes the casino a huge debt and they're holding him. Gu Qi's tone was flat, as if discussing some trivial matter. The casino contacted the Gu family. demanding payment for his release. I let out a derisive snort. What does father think? Father's position. Gucci rose and stood before me, looking down with intense eyes, is that the Gu family doesn't tolerate dead weight, and we certainly don't clean up after gambling addicts. I understood. Gu Tingfeng had completely given up on Gucci Yin, so, I met his gaze. So, Gucci's lips curled into a cold smirk. I'll trouble you, madam, to make a trip to Macau and take care of it. He emphasized the words, take care of it, with deliberate weight. Seeing the undisguised coldness and resolve in his eyes, I understood. He intended to use my hand to deliver the final blow to Gu Qian and to sever all potential troubles for the Gu family once and for all. Alright, I didn't hesitate for a second. I'll go. That very afternoon, I flew to Macau with my lawyer and bodyguards. Casino staff led us to a dimly lit private room. Gu Qian was tied to a chair, bruised and battered, reeking of stale sweat. Not a trace remained of the arrogant young master he once was. When he saw me, he froze momentarily before erupting like a drowning man clutching at straws. Struggling against his restraints, he screamed hoarsely, Shenanxian, it's you, hurry, pay them, get me out of here. I walked up to him, stopped, and quietly watched him. Go back, I repeated, my tone airy. Back where? To the Gu family. Gu Qian nodded eagerly. Yes, back to the Gu family. I'm the second young master of the Gu family. They can't just abandon me. I smiled, leaned in close to him, and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, Gu Qian, can't you see? The Gu family cast you out long ago. Your mother's in prison, your father acts like you're dead, and your brother, I paused, watching the color drain from his face, sent me to give you your final send-off. Gu Qian's pupils contracted violently as he shook his head in denial. No, that's impossible, you're lying. Father would never abandon me, neither would my brother. 80 million in gambling debts. I straightened up and tossed a document before him. Sign this, renounce all claims to the Gu family inheritance, and the debt will be cleared. The casino will let you walk away. That's a gratuitous equity transfer agreement and a waiver of inheritance rights. Gu Qian stared at those papers as if they were venomous snakes, recoiling abruptly. I won't sign. Don't even think about it. 5. Not signing. I raised an eyebrow and shot a meaningful glance at the casino manager beside me. With a wave from the manager, two burly men stepped forward, pinned Gu Qian down, grabbed his finger, and pressed it toward the ink pad. No, let go of me, Shenanxian, you vicious woman, how dare you? Ah, Gu Qian struggled desperately, roaring and cursing. I watched coldly, completely unmoved. Finally, with a cry of utter despair, his thumb was forced onto the end of the agreement. The agreement took effect. I picked up the signed documents, reviewed them, and confirmed everything was in order. Alright, he's all yours, I said to the casino manager. The Gu family has no further ties with this man. The manager understood and had Gu Qian, limp as a rag, eyes vacant, dragged away. What awaited him was the endless abyss of casino debt collection. I turned and left that place reeking of decay. Stepping out of the casino, the neon lights of Macau's nightscape were particularly blinding. My phone buzzed with a text from Gucci. Just one character. Done, I replied with a single character. Done. From this moment on, the name Gu Qian is permanently erased from the Gu family registry. Upon returning to Haicheng, the Gu Corporation had undergone a complete internal transformation. Gucci executed the power transition with an iron fist, silencing all dissent on the board. Under my leadership, the new energy project progressed at lightning speed, with the first product set to launch amid soaring market anticipation. Gucci and I, a couple bound by vengeance and shared interests, became the most formidable partnership in the business world. He managed external affairs with strategic mastery, while I oversaw core technologies and financial operations. Ours was less that of newlyweds and more of battle-hardened comrades who had fought side by side for years. The rumor mill is buzzing, saying we're just putting on a united front while actually being at odds, each using the other for our own ends. We can't be bothered to explain. That day, Gucci, for once, came home on time, bringing a bottle of red wine with him. Let's celebrate, he said, taking off his suit jacket and loosening his tie. The obstacles are cleared, and the project is a go. I raised an eyebrow and took the glass. To our successful partnership. He clinked his glass against mine, a glimmer in his eyes. To securing your position as Mrs. Gu. I chuckled and downed the drink in one go. The wine was rich with a fruity aroma. There's news about Lin and she, he said abruptly. I swirled my glass. Indifferent. She's still alive. In some small Southeast Asian country. She caught a disease, can't afford treatment, and is on her last legs. Gucci said flatly. She sent word that she wants to see you one last time, says she has a secret about your parents to tell you. My parents, my hand holding the glass stilled slightly. My parents died accidentally during an academic expedition years ago. It's always been a subject the Xing family avoids bringing up. How could Lin and she know about it? You think it's a trap? I asked. 99% sure. Gucci looked at me. Are we going? I paused for a moment. Then drained the last of my drink. We're going, even if there's only a 1% chance. I need to get to the bottom of this. Besides, I want to see with my own eyes what has become of that once delicate white lotus, now withered and faded. Gucci didn't stop me. I'll arrange for someone to go with you, he said. 3 days later, accompanied by bodyguards, I arrived in a damp, dilapidated border town in Southeast Asia, in a small clinic reeking of mildew and disinfectant. I finally saw Lin and she lay on the grimy hospital bed, emaciated and gaunt, her face sallow with sunken eyes, the long hair she once took pride in now hung like withered straw. Seeing me, a final glimmer sparked in her clouded eyes as she struggled to sit up. You came. Her voice rasped like a broken bellows. I stood by the bed, keeping my distance, expressionless. Tell me, my parents' secret. Lin and she burst into violent coughing, gasping for breath as a sinister, venomous smile twisted her face. Shenanxian, do you think you've won? Did you know? Your parents back then, their deaths weren't an accident. My heart sank, nails digging into my palms. Explain yourself. It's Gu. Her words came in broken gasps, voice faint. Gu Tingfeng. He was afraid your father's research would threaten the Gu Corporation. So, before she could finish, another wave of wrenching coughs seized her. She suddenly spat a mouthful of dark blood, splattering the filthy bedsheet. I stared at her intently. Where's the proof? Lin Shi's gaze began to grow vacant, a vengeful satisfaction spreading across her face. The evidence, it's long gone. Haha, Shenanxian, you're just a pathetic worm too, helping your enemy build their empire. Her voice faded to a whisper, until finally, her head lolled to the side, and she was completely still. Her eyes remained wide open, frozen with boundless hatred and a trace of mockery. I stood rooted to the spot, the clinic's foul odor filling my nostrils, Lin Shi's dying words slithering into my ears like a venomous snake. Gu Tingfeng killed my parents. Is that even possible? Murder for business gains. The violent impact churned my stomach. I forced myself to calm down. Lin Shi's words couldn't be fully trusted. In her final moments, she just wanted to drag me down with her and mess with my head. But what if it's true? I took a deep breath, turned around, and ordered the bodyguard. Take care of it. Then, I walked away from that disgusting place without looking back. As the plane carried me home, I gazed out at the churning sea of clouds beyond the window, my heart too turbulent to find peace. If what Lin and she said was true, then had all my efforts for revenge since my rebirth been nothing but a cruel joke? Had I actually been helping the Gu family, who might be my father's murderers, target the son of another enemy? Does Gucci know about this? And what role has he been playing in all of this? The plane touched down, and Gucci came to pick me up in person, dressed in a black overcoat. He stood by the car, tall, poised, and radiating authority. Spotting me, he stepped forward and effortlessly took my bag. You look pale. He frowned. What did she say? I looked up at his stern face, now softened with a hint of concern, and for the first time, he felt like a complete stranger. I opened my mouth to speak, but swallowed my words instead. It's not the right time yet. Without evidence, making a move would only tip our hand and leave us at a disadvantage. It's nothing. I lowered my gaze, hiding the turmoil in my eyes. Just seeing her like that turns my stomach. Gucci studied me for a few seconds, then dropped the subject and opened the car door. Let's go home. As I settled into the car, I watched the streets recede rapidly outside the window, a chilling numbness settling in my heart. 6. Back at the villa, I moved into the private study on the top floor under the pretext of needing strict confidentiality for the project's final phase, living and working there day and night. Gucci didn't object, simply instructing the housekeeper to deliver meals on schedule. He seemed preoccupied, often returning well past midnight. An invisible wall had risen between us. I began my investigation without drawing any attention. My parents were leading materials scientists, back then. A national research project they headed began competing with the Gu family's core business at a critical stage. Shortly after, they tragically fell from a cliff during a field survey in what was deemed an accident. The official conclusion pointed to equipment failure. Using the Xing family's connections and the access granted by Gucci, I discreetly obtained the original accident report and the Gu Corporation's confidential records from that period. The report was flawlessly written. But in the GU Corporation archives, a copy of a board meeting minutes marked as destroyed caught my eye. It vaguely mentioned the need to properly handle the potential threat posed by the Xing project. Dated just 1 week before my parents' accident. Properly handle. My heart sank slowly. It's not enough to serve as evidence, but the implication is far too obvious. I need something more concrete. I remembered an old safe my parents left behind. Stored all this time at the Xing family's old house. I couldn't open it as a child and eventually forgot about it. Maybe there's a clue inside. I made up an excuse to go back to the Xing house, sent everyone away, and tried countless combinations using the passwords I knew and my mother's birthday. Finally, with a sharp click, the safe opened. Inside, aside from some old photographs and jewelry, there was only a single thick notebook with a leather cover. It's my father's lab journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first pages were filled with complex formulas and data, until I reached the final few entries. March 15th, Gu Tingfeng visited today, making aggressive demands. He insisted we either halt the project or share the core data. Preposterous. This project concerns the nation's welfare. How could we let it become a tool for capitalists to profit from? March 18th. Another instance of deliberate tampering was found during equipment inspection. Reporting it to the police was useless. Could it be the GU Corporation? Do they truly believe they're above the law? March 22nd. Someone is following us. Yueru, my mother, is terrified. I backed up the critical data and hidden it. The diary entry ends abruptly here. Where did I hide it? The next few pages have been torn out. I collapsed onto the floor, my entire body going cold. There's no direct evidence. But the contents of my father's diary perfectly corroborate what Lin Shi said with her dying breath. Gu Tingfeng. It was him all along. For the sake of profit, he actually went through with such a vicious act. An overwhelming tide of hatred instantly consumed me, 1,000 times more intense than when I learned of Gu Qian and Lin Shi's betrayal. I carefully tucked away the diary, erased all traces of my presence, and left the Xing residence. Back at the villa, I locked myself in the study, torn apart by overwhelming grief and hatred. I had been reborn with a single-minded focus on revenge against Gu Qian and Lin Shi, never imagining that the true enemy had been sitting high above all along, and I had even been calling him father. That evening, Gucci knocked on my door. Come out for dinner. I took a deep breath, suppressed all my emotions, and opened the door. He stood at the doorway, his brow slightly furrowed. You haven't been yourself lately. The project's been stressful. I avoided his gaze and walked toward the dining room. The dining table was enveloped in silence. He spoke abruptly. Before you went to Macau, you asked if I knew what Lin Shi was going to say. My chopstick stilled in my hand as I looked up at him. His gaze was steady, probing. What exactly did she say? My heart hammered in my chest. Was he testing me, or did he genuinely not know? I set down my chopsticks, looked him straight in the eye, and said word by word, she told me my parents' deaths were no accident. Gucci's pupils contracted almost imperceptibly, though he quickly regained his composure. That fleeting anomaly didn't escape my notice. He knows. He definitely knows something. You're taking the ravings of a dying man seriously. His tone remained even, but his knuckles turned white as he gripped the water glass. Is that so? I offered a frosty smile, but I went through the GU Corporation archives from that year. I saw the board meeting minutes about properly handling the potential threats from the Xing family project, dated right before my parents' accident. Gucci's expression finally shifted. He set down the water glass with a sharp clink. A deathly silence filled the study. We stood facing each other across the dining table, the air frozen solid between us. After a long moment, he rose slowly to his feet, his imposing figure radiating an overwhelming sense of pressure. Shenanxian, his voice was low, laced with warning. Some things are better left unknown for your own good. I looked up at him without flinching. So it's true, Gu Tingfeng killed my parents, and you knew about it, maybe even had a hand in it. The last few words came out with great difficulty. Gucci's eyes were as deep and turbulent as the sea, swirling with emotions I couldn't decipher. He neither admitted nor denied it. The Gu family ship is now in our hands. He walked around the table, stopping before me, leaning down with his hands on the back of my chair. He trapped me between him and the table, his presence overwhelming. Let the past stay in the past. What matters now is the present and the future. He was so close I could see the dark currents in his eyes, feel the threat in his words and a barely perceptible note of admonition. Let it go. I repeated the words, tasting nothing but bitter irony. How could one let go of a blood-soaked vendetta? I stared at his face, now inches from mine, the same face that had once offered a sliver of camaraderie on my path of vengeance, now stripped bare to reveal nothing but cold calculation and deceit. I shoved him away abruptly and rose to my feet. Gucci, Don't you dare lump me in with you. I stared at him, enunciating each word with icy finality. Your ship means nothing to me. As of today, our partnership is terminated. After my complete falling out with Gucci, I moved out of the Gu family villa and into a discreet apartment owned by the Xing family. The new energy project is nearing completion. It's my most crucial bargaining chip, using the need for absolute focus during these final stages as my excuse. I've cut off all outside contact, including with Gucci. I know he's looking for me, through calls, texts, even posting people outside the Xing family estate and my office building, but I'm avoiding him at every turn. I need time to sort through my thoughts and, more importantly, to find the evidence that will deliver a decisive blow. Just when I was at my wit's end, an unexpected person reached out to me. It was Su Man, Gucci's former personal assistant. A remarkably capable and strikingly beautiful woman who had voluntarily resigned shortly after Gucci fell into a coma. I had always sensed there was something subtle between her and Gucci, though I never looked into it at the time. She arranged to meet me at an extremely discreet cafe. Miss Xing, or, should I call you Mrs. Gu? Su Man stirred her coffee, her smile gentle, but with a barely perceptible sharpness in her eyes. Get straight to the point. I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. She set down her spoon and looked at me. I know you're looking into what happened to your parents, about Gu Tingfeng, about Gucci. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my expression neutral. What do you know? I might know more than you think. Su Man leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. The first thing Gucci did after waking up wasn't to consolidate his power, but to secretly investigate his father, especially regarding that accident 3 years ago that claimed your parents' lives. I tightened my grip on the coffee cup. He's looking into it too. He's been investigating all along, Su Man stated firmly. He suspects his father's hands aren't clean. It might even be connected to his biological mother's sudden illness from years earlier. Gucci's birth mother had passed away from illness when he was 10, not long after. Lu Yuru entered the household with Gucci Yin. Could it be that? An even more terrifying thought crossed my mind. Why did he tell you all this? I stared intently at Su Man. Su Man lowered her gaze, a bitter smile touching her lips. Because, in a way, we're kindred spirits. My father was once Gu Tingfeng's right-hand man, and he was also privy to your parents' project. He died of a sudden heart attack 1 month before your parents' accident. Gucci approached me, and we formed an alliance. He needed my help to gather evidence of Gu Tingfeng's past crimes, while I needed to use him to get justice for my father. Su Man lifted her eyes, her gaze resolute. During the 3 years he was in a coma, I never stopped investigating. I have certain materials in my possession. What is it? Some phone recordings and transaction records that prove Gu Tingfeng ordered someone to sabotage your parents' exploration equipment and fake the accident scene, though not direct evidence. It's enough to make the police take it seriously and reopen the investigation. Su Man took a tiny USB drive from her bag and slid it toward me. Also, the reason Lu Yuru managed to climb the social ladder back then was that she administered slow-acting poison to Gucci's mother. The evidence for that is in here too. I took the cold USB drive, feeling its weight as if it were 1,000 pounds. So, Gucci approached me, protected me, and even tacitly allowed me to deal with Lu Yuru and Gucci Yin, not just because of my capabilities and the Xing family backing me, but also because we share a common enemy. Was his previous secrecy and warnings meant to avoid tipping our hand, or was he testing me? Why didn't he tell me himself? I asked. He said you're too clever, and too impulsive. He needed to be sure you'd be a reliable ally, not a revenge-driven loose cannon who'd jeopardize the entire operation. Su Man looked at me. Now he's leaving the choice to you. Do you trust him, join forces to take down Gu Tingfeng, and obtain solid evidence to clear your parents' names, or keep going it alone and risk losing everything at the finish line? This was too much to process. I needed time to digest it all. If Su Man is telling the truth, then Gucci's mind is frighteningly deep. How much of his feelings toward me are genuine, and how much are fake? I need to think it over, I said as I put away the USB drive. Of course, Su Man stood up, but, Miss Xing, time is running out. Gu Tingfeng seems to have caught on. He's been making frequent moves lately, and, she paused meaningfully, Gucci doesn't only have me as a collaborator by his side. Some people may not want to see you two join forces. With that, she gave a meaningful look and turned to leave. I sat there motionless, watching the endless stream of traffic outside the window, my mind in complete turmoil. Gucci, Su Man, Gu Tingfeng. Everyone seemed to be wearing a mask, every word potentially concealing a trap. Was the content on that USB drive genuine, or just another bait to lure me into their game? 7. I took out my phone and stared at the unread message Gucci had sent me earlier. Come back. we need to talk. My finger hovered over the screen, frozen in hesitation. Should I trust him and take the gamble, or, better to kill by mistake than let anyone slip away? Hatred burned within me. But reason told me that Su Man's words were most likely true. Gucci had more than enough motive to go after Gu Tingfeng. Finally, I took a deep breath and made my decision. I replied to Gucci's text message. Meet me at the apartment at 8 tonight. At 8 o'clock sharp, Gucci appeared at my apartment door. He wore a simple black shirt, his posture erect. There was a faint trace of weariness on his face, yet his gaze remained sharp, piercing enough to see right through a person. So you've decided to see me, he said as he stepped inside, closing the door behind him with his backhand. His tone gave away no hint of emotion. I didn't turn on the main lights, only the floor lamp beside the sofa. Its dim, yellowish glow carved the living room into distinct patches of light and shadow. Su Man came to see me, I said, cutting straight to the chase as I placed the USB drive on the coffee table. She told me you're investigating Gu Tingfeng, looking into my parents' deaths. And your mother's so-called illness and passing. Gucci's gaze fell on the USB drive, his expression unchanged, as if he had anticipated this all along. What else did she say? She said you and I share a common enemy. I stared into his eyes, not missing a single subtle shift in his expression. She also mentioned there's more than just her among your collaborators. Gucci walked over to the opposite side of the sofa but remained standing, looking down at me from his height. The interplay of light and shadow carved sharp contours across his face. What she said is mostly true, he admitted, with a bluntness that took me by surprise. Mostly, I latched onto that word. I am indeed investigating Gu Tingfeng, and I do need allies. He paused, his gaze deepening as he looked at me. But Su Man, she's hiding part of the truth. What truth? About her own motives. Gucci's voice turned colder. Her father did die because of that project. But he wasn't entirely innocent. He took money from Gu Tingfeng and participated in sabotaging your parents' project in the early stages. Later, Gu Tingfeng silenced him along with the others. Su Man knows this. Her approach to me is less about cooperation and more about using me to avenge her father. At the same time, she wants to get her hands on the evidence of her father's bribery that Gu Tingfeng holds. To clear his name completely, a cold smirk tugged at Gucci's lips. She didn't tell you that her father was the one Gu Tingfeng initially bribed to tamper with your parents' equipment, did she? A chill ran down my spine. Su Man, I never imagined she could be so cunning. What about you? I suppressed the turmoil inside and stared him down. How much are you hiding from me? And who is this more than one collaborator you mentioned? Gucci fell silent for a moment, as if weighing his options. Just then, his phone rang at the worst possible moment. He glanced at the caller ID, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly before he declined the call. But then my phone rang too, from an unknown number. A sense of foreboding seized me. I answered the call and heard a young man's voice, deliberately hushed and choked with tears. Is this MS, Shenanxian? Please, you have to save my mom. I'm Gucci's son. My mother is by way. Gu Tingfeng. Gu Tingfeng is trying to silence us. Gucci's son. My head snapped up as I looked at Gucci. He had clearly heard the phone call too. His face instantly turned ashen, and a flicker of something I'd never seen before flashed in his eyes. Panic. Where are you? I steadied my voice and asked into the phone. We're at the abandoned chemical plant in the western suburbs. They're going to find us soon. Please. The call was abruptly cut off, leaving only the dial tone. A deathly silence fell over the living room. I set down my phone and stared at Gucci, enunciating each word clearly. Gucci, you'd better give me a proper explanation. Who is by way, and what's this about a son? Gucci closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, his gaze held a chilling resolve. By way, was my college sweetheart, he said in a low voice, with a barely perceptible rasp. After we parted ways, she discovered she was pregnant and had the child. She's been avoiding the Gu family all along, raising our son completely on her own. So Gu Tingfeng doesn't know they exist. I pressed further. I didn't know before, Gucci said with a dark look in his eyes, but recently, he might have found out. He's afraid this illegitimate child's existence will undermine my value and jeopardize his marriage alliance with the Xing family. So he wants to silence the witness permanently. As I looked at him, a wave of bitter irony washed over me. No wonder he kept me at arm's length before. No wonder he tacitly approved of all my actions. No wonder Su Man said he had more than one collaborator around him. His protection of me, while partly due to our shared opposition to Gu Tingfeng, was more likely an attempt to leverage the Xing family's influence and my status as Mrs. Gu to keep Gu Tingfeng in check, buying time and space for the woman and child he truly cared about. and I, Shinanxian, the so-called research prodigy, the so-called queen of revenge, was nothing more than a convenient pawn on his chessboard from start to finish, or perhaps even a human shield. Overwhelming humiliation and betrayal nearly drowned me, suffocating me more intensely than when I learned the truth about my parents' deaths. I looked at him and suddenly let out a low, bitter laugh. The sound filled with desolation and self-mockery. Gucci, you've really played your cards well. I stood up, walked over to him, and looked up at his cold, handsome face, using me as a decoy to draw Gu Tingfeng's fire, protecting you and your precious illegitimate child, your white moonlight, and once Gu Tingfeng is dealt with, you'll just kick me to the curb and reunite with your old flame and your perfect little family. I raised my hand and jabbed my finger hard against his chest. My fingertips icy cold. What do you take me for? Gucci grabbed my wrist with a firm grip, his expression complicated. Shinanxian, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I jerked my hand away from his, stepping back as my gaze turned completely frosty, like tempered ice. Gucci, I'm telling you, our partnership ends here. Gu Tingfeng, I'll deal with you myself. As for you, I said, staring at him with bone-chilling coldness in every syllable. You and that bastard son of yours better pray you never cross my path. With that, I turned around, grabbed the car keys and the USB drive, and stormed out of the apartment without looking back. The night wind cut through the air, stinging my face like a blade. I slid into the driver's seat, fired up the engine, and slammed the accelerator to the floor. The car shot into the night like an arrow from a bow. Destination: the abandoned chemical plant in the western suburbs. I wasn't going to rescue his cherished first love or their illegitimate child. I was going to see with my own eyes what these people looked like. The ones Gucci was going to such extreme lengths to protect. More importantly, I need to get my hands on the evidence of Gu Tingfeng silencing a witness by murder. The western suburbs, an abandoned chemical plant. The rusted steel framework stood like the skeleton of a giant beast under the ghastly moonlight. While the night wind whistled eerily through the broken window frames, I parked my car in the distant shadows and slipped in silently. The air was thick with the pungent smell of rust and chemical reagents. Muffled sobs and harsh shouts echoed from deep within the factory. You bitch, think you can hide? Hand over that little bastard, please, spare the child. He has nothing to do with the Gu family, came a woman's trembling plea. Following the sounds, I hid behind a pile of discarded machinery and saw what was happening inside. A plainly dressed woman with a pale face, yet still bearing traces of her former delicate features, shielded a boy of about 7 or 8. The boy, terrified and pale-faced, clung desperately to his mother's clothes. Facing them were 3 men in black suits with menacing expressions, holding clubs in their hands. They're Gu Tingfeng's men, no big deal. Gucci's offspring is the original sin, the leader sneered. The boss said to clean up thoroughly, leave no one alive. He raised the club, poised to strike the woman. I burst from the shadows, hitting record on my phone as I shouted, stop, I've called the police. The men froze, startled by my sudden appearance. Seizing their moment of confusion, I grabbed the woman named Bai Wei and the child, growling, run. Bai Wei reacted instantly, scooping up the child and rushing out right behind me. Damn it, there's a woman too. After them came furious shouts and the sound of pursuing footsteps from behind. The chemical plant's layout was complex. We desperately ran, using abandoned equipment and shadows for cover. Bullets whizzed past our ears, striking metal frames and sending sparks flying. I pulled Bai Wei behind a large reaction vessel, temporarily cutting off the pursuer's line of sight. Bai Wei was gasping for breath, the child in her arms whimpering softly. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with terror and a flicker of gratitude. You're Miss Sheng, He, shut up. I cut her off coldly, having no interest in hearing her mention Gu Qi's name. I quickly checked my phone, making sure the earlier conversation and threats had been clearly recorded. This is undeniable proof that Gu Tingfeng hired a killer. Just then, the screech of brakes echoed from outside, followed by even more chaotic sounds of fighting, punctuated by screams. Gu Qi is here already. He sure moves fast. I signaled for Bai Wei and the child to stay hidden, then cautiously peeked out myself. I saw Gucci with several men already locked in combat with the 3 assassins. His moves were ruthless and lethal, completely unlike someone who had just woken from a coma. Clearly, he hadn't been idle these past 3 years. Soon, the 3 assassins were subdued and tied up on the ground. Gucci strode quickly toward our hiding spot, his face etched with unmistakable anxiety. Bai Wei, Xiaoxia, 8, his gaze first fell upon the mother and son. Only after confirming they were safe did he turn his eyes to me, his expression complex. And Xian, you. I stepped out from behind the reaction tank, phone in hand, and looked at him impassively. Gucci, drop the act. Gu Tingfeng hired a killer. The evidence is solid, you protect your woman and child, I'll get my revenge, we're even." He furrowed his brow tightly. "It's not what you think, by way, and I have long since." "I don't care," I snapped, cutting him off as I uploaded the recording back up to the cloud and shoved my phone back into my pocket. "Take your people and get out of here, now." I turned to leave this disgusting place. "Xinanqian," Gucci called out from behind me, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "Do you have to be like this?" I stopped in my tracks but didn't turn around. "Gucci, from the moment you decided to use me, we became enemies." With that, I strode away without looking back. Back at the apartment, I immediately contacted my most trusted lawyer and the core members of the Xing family, submitting both the recorded evidence and the other evidence against Gu Tingfeng from the USB drive. Prosecute Gu Tingfeng for intentional homicide, commercial fraud, illegal asset transfer. Pursue every single charge to the fullest extent of the law. The lawyer looked at the thick stack of documents, his expression grave. "Ms. Xing. This evidence is more than enough to put him away for life, but it might implicate the Gu Corporation, and even Mr. Gucci." I let out a cold laugh. What do I care about the fate of the Gu family? As for Gucci, I paused, the image of him shielding Bai Wei and her child flashing before my eyes. A sharp pain pierced my heart. Proceed according to the law. The next day, Gu Tingfeng was taken into custody by police directly from his penthouse office at Gu Corporation. The news exploded like a bombshell, instantly setting the entire city abuzz. Gu Corporation Chairman Gu Tingfeng arrested on suspicion of multiple felonies. Shocking upheaval in a prominent family. The Gu Empire teeters on the brink of collapse. A former titan of industry, now a murder suspect. Public outrage erupted as Gu Corporation stock hit the limit down at market open, plunging everything into chaos. Sitting in my office, I watched the news footage of Gu Tingfeng being shoved into a police car, a pitiful sight, but I felt no satisfaction, only a chilling numbness. I've finally avenged my parents, so why does my heart still feel so hollow? The phone rang. It was Gucci. Moments later, the office door burst open. Gucci stood at the threshold, radiating hostility. His eyes bloodshot. "Xinanqian, are you satisfied now?" he rasped, his voice icy with contempt. I looked up calmly and met his gaze. "Mr. Gu, this is the Xing family's property. Please leave." He closed in step by step, his overwhelming presence nearly suffocating, bringing down Gu Tingfeng and destroying the Gu Corporation. "Is this the outcome you wanted? Your Gu family got exactly what they deserved." I stood up, confronting him, "Including you, Gucci, using me, deceiving me. I haven't even settled that score with you yet." He suddenly grabbed my wrist with such force it felt like he was about to crush my bones. "I never meant to hurt you. Let go." I struggled with all my might, but couldn't break free. Gu Tingfeng has fallen. The Gu Empire is finished. What's next? He closed in on me, his breath hot on my face. "Are you coming after Xiaoxia and me too?" Xiaoxia, that illegitimate child's name, seeing the undisguised protectiveness in his eyes. The last shred of that ridiculous sentiment in my heart was completely extinguished. "That depends on whether you two stand in my way," I said coldly. Gucci stared at me with an intensity that felt like he was trying to skin me alive. After a long moment, he suddenly laughed, a cold, cruel laugh. "Fine, very well, Xinanqian, since that's how it is, don't blame me for what happens next." He abruptly released me, turned around, and strode away. I watched his figure disappear through the doorway, then slowly sank back into the chair, a chill running through my entire body. I knew there was no turning back between Gucci and me. What followed would be a fight to the death. What I didn't know was that shortly after Gucci left, a negative story about me quietly climbed the trending charts. Shocking. The mastermind behind the Gu family's collapse is the Xing family heiress, willing to frame others to seize power. The accompanying images were a blurry photo of me and Gucci in a standoff outside the chemical plant, along with some meticulously edited, out-of-context so-called evidence. Gucci's counterattack was as swift as it was dirty, fueled by capital. That defamatory hashtag shot to the top of trending searches, unleashing a torrent of online abuse from trolls and misled netizens. Some even started doxing my address and harassing my family. The Xing Group's stock price also took a hit and began to fall. A few old-timers on the board who were already unhappy with my rapid rise began to stir, applying pressure both overtly and covertly. As I observed this familiar tactic of manipulating public opinion, a cold sneer formed in my heart, truly a chip off the old Gu block, cut from the same despicable cloth as Gu Tingfeng and Gu Qiyan. But I was no longer the Xinanqian of my past life, who knew only how to endure in silence. I immediately called an emergency meeting, summoning the Xing Corporation's PR and legal departments. First, under the name of Shin Group and myself, issue the most strongly worded legal letters, sue every single marketing account and troll ringleader that's been spreading rumors. The list tech department compiled leaves no one out. Second, contact all our media partners and release the official details of Gu Tingfeng's arrest, along with some evidence of his years of illegal operations, tax evasion, and even alleged ties to organized crime. Let's muddy the waters. Third, I turned to the head of tech department, release the special package I had you prepare earlier, using anonymous IPs, staggered timing, and in multiple batches. The head of tech department nodded gravely, understanding immediately. After the meeting, I sat alone in my office, watching the overcast sky outside. My phone vibrated on the desk with abusive messages from several unknown numbers. Expressionlessly, I deleted and blocked each one. Gucci, you think you can crush me with public opinion? Let's see who holds the better cards. That afternoon, public sentiment began to shift subtly. First, several highly influential state media outlets reposted the police bulletin detailing Gu Tingfeng's alleged involvement in multiple serious crimes, confirming his guilt. Soon after, a wave of damaging leaks about the Gu Group began circulating online, detailing years of internal mismanagement, nepotism, and illicit financial dealings. The revelations included absurd incidents from Gu Qian's tenure and specifics on how Lu Yuru exploited her status as Mrs. Gu to amass personal wealth. Public attention began to shift. So the Gu family is this corrupt? The rot goes right down to the roots. Looking at it this way, Shenanxian might have really been forced to retaliate. Is Gucci trying to shift the blame by throwing mud at this critical moment? But this was just the beginning. Late at night, when most netizens were about to log off, an encrypted forum suddenly dropped several explosive revelations that spread like wildfire across major social media platforms. First bombshell, confirmed, Gucci's love child, exposing the mother by Wei's true identity. Far from being his pure first love, she's actually a scheming woman who slept her way to the top. Includes photos of Bai Wei's wild partying days and flirtatious encounters with multiple men, plus leaked chats showing her secretly contacting paparazzi to expose the child's identity in exchange for massive hush money. Second article, Gucci joins forces with stepmother Lu Yuru. Is his 3-year coma real or fake? An in-depth exposé of the eldest young master of the Gu family's power grab. This piece meticulously analyzes the timeline of Gucci's actions after waking up, suggesting he had long been colluding with Lu Yuru and might have even faked his coma to eliminate Gu Tingfeng and Gu Qiyan in one fell swoop, aiming to monopolize the Gu Corporation. Though lacking direct evidence, the analysis is well-reasoned and highly provocative. Third article, the true face of the devoted husband, Gucci's secret overseas accounts exposed, mysterious flow of massive funds. This post reveals several offshore accounts linked to Gucci, along with records of large financial transactions that coincidentally occurred around the time he woke up, sparking widespread speculation. The release of these 3 bombshells sent the entire internet into a frenzy. Oh my god, the amount of information is overwhelming. Gucci is no saint either, illegitimate child, schemer, and they're transferring assets. This whole family, from the old to the young, is utterly rotten. So Shenanxian is actually the biggest victim. Tricked into a marriage and used by that father-son duo. No wonder she fought back. Who wouldn't go crazy in that situation? The court of public opinion did a complete 180. The same people who cursed me out before are now pouring on the sympathy and support. The mud Gucci tried to sling at me has come back to haunt him 10-fold, 100-fold. I watched the comments scrolling across the computer screen, then closed the laptop with an impassive expression. Can't handle it already, Gucci. This is only the beginning. The next day, I made a high-profile appearance at the Xing Corporation press conference. Standing before a sea of cameras and flashing lights, I wore a sharp black suit with impeccable makeup, commanding the room with undeniable presence. First, regarding the recent false allegations circulating online against me and the Xing Corporation, our legal team has initiated full legal proceedings. We will pursue this matter to the fullest extent. No exceptions will be made. My voice rang out clear and resolute. Furthermore, I hereby formally announce that Xing Corporation will immediately terminate all business collaborations with Gu Group. We have also initiated legal proceedings to hold them accountable for outstanding payments and breach of contract. The press corps erupted in murmurs of astonishment. Miss Xing, regarding your marital relationship with Mr. Gucci, I cut off the question mid-sentence, raising my left hand to reveal a bare ring finger. My marriage to Mr. Gucci began as an elaborately orchestrated deception, I declared, my gaze sweeping across the room with icy scorn. Now that the truth has come to light, this farce must end. I have retained legal counsel to file for divorce. As for Mr. Gu and his mistress and illegitimate child. I paused, voice dripping with contempt. May they remain eternally entangled in their blissful union. Without another glance at the media frenzy erupting behind me, I turned and walked away with decisive finality. The press conference achieved remarkable results. Xing Corporation's stock halted its decline and rebounded. As my resolute stance earned market approval, the GU conglomerate plunged into an abyss. Its stock prices hit the limit down for days. Partners terminated contracts one after another. Banks pressed for loan repayments, and employees were gripped with panic, triggering a wave of resignations. Gucci was overwhelmed, struggling to salvage the situation, but faced with the collapsing decline and endless scandals, he was powerless to turn the tide. Just then, I received an unexpected package. Inside were a stack of photos and a paternity test report. The photo showed Gu Qiyan and Lin Enshi, who had actually sneaked back to the country and were hiding in a filthy, run-down urban village. Both looked haggard and emaciated, fighting and hurling insults at each other over money like raving lunatics. And the paternity test report revealed, the child Lin Enshi had miscarried back then, shared no biological relation with Gu Qiyan. As I looked at the report, I suddenly recalled the shifty look in Lin Enshi's eyes in our past life, when she wept and complained to Gu Qiyan after the miscarriage. What a cunning sleight of hand. She had no idea who the father was, or even if she knew it wasn't him. She still tried to pin it on Gu Qiyan, but then, by a twist of fate, she lost the baby, which only ended up cementing the accusation that I drove her to her death. I let out a cold laugh and anonymously mailed this gift to Lu Yuru, who was still counting on her son to get her out of prison. They say Lu Yuru went completely mad after seeing it, howling like a lunatic in her cell all night long. As for Gu Qiyan and Lin Enshi, let's just say I accidentally let slip their hideout to a few loan sharks hunting them down. I later heard Gu Qiyan had a leg broken by debt collectors and was thrown out of the urban village with Lin Enshi, reduced to begging on the streets where they'd fight bloody battles over a mouthful of spoiled food. They hated each other, tormented each other, wallowed in the mud, unable to live with dignity yet incapable of dying. This brought me far greater satisfaction than simply ending their lives. After disposing of that trash, I threw myself entirely into the final push for the new energy project. This achievement belongs solely to me, Xinanxian, with no remaining ties to the Gu family. The project was a resounding success. On the day of the launch event, Xing Corporation's stock price skyrocketed. Standing under the spotlight, I basked in the attention and accolades from the crowd. I knew then that I had truly made my mark, no longer defined as someone's daughter, someone's fiancée, or someone's wife. I was simply Xinanxian. After the launch event, I encountered Gucci in the backstage lounge, uninvited. He had lost a noticeable amount of weight, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. His eyes were shadowed with profound weariness and defeat, the once proud and aloof demeanor of the eldest son of the Gu family completely gone. And Xian, his voice was hoarse, tinged with a plea. Let's talk, Mr. Gu. There's nothing left to discuss between us. I sat at the vanity, unhurriedly removing my earrings, not even bothering to glance his way. The Gu Empire is finished. I accept that. He moved behind me, watching my icy reflection in the mirror. I wronged you, used you, kept things from you, but my feelings for Bai Wei died long ago, and I had no idea about Xiaozhe's existence until recently. Everything I did was to protect the child. He's innocent, after all, innocent. I let out a scornful laugh, finally meeting his gaze through the mirror. Gucci, spare me the theatrics. Your family is rotten to the core. Gu Tingfeng committed murder. Lu Yuru resorted to poison. Gu Qiyan is a venomous fool. And you? I rose to my feet, turning to face him with a gaze as sharp as an ice blade. You're selfish, cold-hearted, and will stop at nothing to get what you want, even using marriage as a bargaining chip. How are you any different from that scumbag father of yours? You're only coming to me with this now because you've lost everything. Hoping to find some last shred of comfort or a chance to make a comeback here, I took a step closer, my tone dripping with venom. Let me make this clear. Gucci, you don't deserve it. His face turned deathly pale, his lips trembling, as if my merciless words had pierced him to the core. I really. He tried to explain. Really what? I cut him off, my eyes filled with disgust. Really had feelings for me. Don't say such disgusting things. Your sincerity is even more worthless than your father's money and your brother's brains. I picked up my handbag, ready to leave. Xinanxian, he growled behind me, with a final mix of unwillingness and despair. Do you have to be so heartless? My steps faltered as I slowly turned to face him, staring into his bloodshot eyes. I could only feel the sheer absurdity of it all. Heartless. I repeated the word as if hearing the most ridiculous joke. Gucci, you dare speak to me about affection? Are you even worthy? He stepped forward, trying to grab my arm with near-obsessive urgency. Yes, I used you. I kept things from you, but we were married. Do you think any man would dare take you after leaving me, Shinanxian? With your notorious reputation for being ruthless, what respectable family would ever welcome a woman like you? I looked at him, at the deeply ingrained arrogance and prejudice of feudal patriarchy in his eyes, as if gazing upon a pile of repulsive filth. In this day and age, he still thinks divorce is a stain on a woman's reputation, that I need to rely on a man, that I need to be wanted. The last shred of my patience vanished. I suddenly raised my hand. A sharp slap landed hard across his face, cutting off his idiotic words. Gucci's head snapped to the side from the blow, a vivid red handprint instantly blooming across his cheek. He kept his face, staring at me in disbelief as if I'd committed some unforgivable transgression. Gucci, I shook my slightly numb wrist, my voice dripping with icy venom. Take your disgusting feudal mentality and shove it. I, Shinanxian, have never been anyone's accessory. I stepped forward, locking eyes with his shocked gaze, driving each word clearly and deliberately into his ears. Did you really think I agreed to this arranged marriage because I loved you, or because the Xing family needed the Gu family? Let me make this clear, none of it is true. If it weren't for leveraging the Gu family's influence to bring down Gu Tingfeng faster and uncover the truth about my parents, do you really think your rotten to the core family is worthy of being associated with my name? Shinanxian, marriage, I let out a scornful laugh, my eyes filled with utter contempt and disgust. That has always been nothing but a burden to me, a tool, never something I sought after. Now that the tool has served its purpose, it's time to discard the burden. Gucci stood frozen in place, his face flushing red then paling white before turning ashen, as if truly seeing me for the first time. His eyes held profound shock and a kind of bewildered disbelief. As though his entire worldview had crumbled, the absurd notions he'd clung to about marriage and women's worth, the very foundations of his fragile dignity, shattered into nothingness before my words. 9. His lips trembled, but no words escaped them. Watching him in this broken state stirred no emotion in me, only utter disgust. Gucci, I never want to see you again. The sight of you makes me sick. Later, I heard Gucci fell on hard times. The Gu family went into bankruptcy liquidation, leaving him saddled with astronomical debt. The once high and mighty young Master Gu was forced to sell everything he could, including his mother's cherished old residence that he had treasured so deeply, just to barely cover a fraction of the deficit. He tried to stage a comeback, reaching out to all his so-called buddies from the old days, but when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Everyone kicks a man when he's down. No one wanted to touch his mess. And certainly no one dared risk offending me or the now powerful Xing family to help him. He had to start from the very bottom, taking jobs at small companies or picking up odd freelance projects. But accustomed to giving orders, his innate arrogance and that out-of-place noble air made him clash with everyone and fail at every turn. His notorious reputation, marriage fraud, exploiting women, ruthless tactics, and an illegitimate child he kept hidden, made any respectable family with connections steer clear of him. The socialites and heiresses who once flocked to him now regarded him as if he were venomous snakes or savage beasts. At a small industry gathering, someone spotted him trying to strike up a conversation with Miss Liu, an heiress from a family in the building materials business. She had once been one of Gucci's most ardent admirers, but Miss Liu merely shot him a contemptuous glance, recoiled 2 steps back as if avoiding something filthy, and quickly linked arms with her male companion. Her voice was pitched just loud enough for those nearby to hear. TSK, if it isn't young Master Gu, what's this? Instead of chasing after your precious white moonlight and your child, you're slumming it in a place like this. How pathetic. After being trampled by your father's mistress and her bastard son all through your childhood, you still haven't learned your lesson. Serves you right. A wave of muffled snickers rippled through the crowd. Gucci's face turned ashen. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white, yet he couldn't utter a single word in retort. Under the weight of the crowd's mixed gazes, some pitying, others scornful, he finally made a humiliating retreat. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Later, I heard he'd moved to an urban village, crammed into a dilapidated apartment building with people he wouldn't have given a second glance before. He was constantly scrambling to make ends meet, his hair graying prematurely, making him look a good decade older than his actual age. His illegitimate son, Xiaoxia, fell ill in those squalid conditions. With no money for proper treatment, the illness took root. Bai Wei couldn't stomach such a hard life. One night, she took what little savings Gucci had left and ran off with another man, never to return. This left Gucci struggling in the mire with his sickly son, who was full of resentment towards him. the man who once schemed to control everything, believing he held all the cards, ended up utterly alone and destitute, stripped of even his most basic dignity. He became the very kind of person he himself despised the most. After that, I rarely heard any news about him. Perhaps he's fading away in some obscure corner, or perhaps, who even cares, occasionally. When I come across financial news about the Xing family or myself, I'd have a fleeting moment of recollection, remembering that such a person once existed, but that's all there is to it. I left him far behind long ago, reducing him to a trivial, almost sordid footnote in my glorious life. Even mentioning him feels like a waste of breath. Story 2. In my previous life, when the truck came hurtling towards us, I pushed my mother out of the way and got hit myself. Afterward, I was left paralyzed from the neck down and despised by my entire family. Even my mother called me a debt-collecting demon, saying I had dragged down her life. She would often hold my cousin's hand and say, "She's more like my real daughter." Eventually, I died from abuse. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day of the accident. This time, I didn't save her. Instead, I smiled and said, "Mom, now it's your turn to be the debt-collecting demon." The brakes failed, and cries of "run" filled the air. In disbelief, I looked ahead. A truck, its brakes malfunctioned, was barreling down the road straight towards my mom, who had twisted her ankle and couldn't move. This scene was so familiar. I realized instantly that I had been reborn, back to the day I was 16, the day of the accident. Soon, the truck was upon her. My mom, panicked, turned and pleaded for my help. Ning ning, save Mom. In my past life, that was the moment I didn't hesitate to rush out and pull her to safety. She was unharmed then. Meanwhile, I ended up in the hospital for a long time and eventually became paralyzed, confined to a bed for life. After just a few days, my mom grew tired of caring for me and left me with a nanny, ignoring my existence. The nanny, seeing that my family didn't value me, abused me every day. I died full of resentment, and my mom, disgusted by the smell of my body, refused to even look at me until the end. And all this disgust was because I saved her. Coming back to my senses, tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't believe I had another chance to do things over. Ning ning, save me. The truck was almost upon her, and my mom pleaded again, her eyes begging, but I just smirked at her, withdrew my gaze, and quickly moved to a safer place. After a loud crash, I calmly watched as the truck ran over my mom and said lightly, "Mom, now it's your turn to be the debt-collecting demon." My mom was rushed to the hospital and ended up paralyzed just like me in my previous life. She couldn't accept the reality and wailed in her hospital bed all day, "Why can't I feel my legs at all?" Her disheveled appearance was like that of a madwoman. I approached and said coolly, "Mom, you just can't walk. That's all. You're still alive, aren't you? Making such a fuss is embarrassing. Be mindful of your image." My casual remark made her even more furious. She grabbed a cup beside her and threw it at me. "How dare you say that? Why didn't you save me? You're so malicious. I don't have a daughter like you." I dodged the cup easily and added, "Mom, accusing me like that is moral blackmail." Furious, she cursed me, "You evil creature, has your conscience been eaten by a dog? I'm your real mother." I almost laughed out loud at her frenzy. Now she remembers she's my real mom, but I recall, in my last life, just shedding a few extra tears made her impatiently say my crying was embarrassing. And if she had known she'd be morally blackmailed, she would have preferred I didn't save her. Even after I was discharged, she never visited me again, telling me to face reality since nobody owed me anything. How come now, when it's her turn to suffer the same fate, she can't handle it? I thought she was strong, but it turns out she's only good at spouting cold words. Just then, my dad returned from a business trip. He was heartbroken, holding my mother as he wept bitterly. He assured my mother not to worry, promising to never leave her side. My mother believed him wholeheartedly and even remarked on how fortunate she was to have married such a good husband, but she was far too naive. In my previous life, my father also showed concern for me for a while, but as his guilt faded, he began to ignore me just like my mother did. Later, when my mother brought my cousin, Julie, home, he completely forgot about me, treating her as if she were his own daughter. Even when my cousin mocked me for smelling bad, he simply banished me to the basement. If he could be so heartless to his own biological daughter, how much better could he treat a wife with whom he shares no blood ties? After my mom became paralyzed, she would scream at us all day and constantly suspected my dad of infidelity. We ignored her, and she resorted to cursing us with foul language. "You heartless creatures, is this how you treat me? You will be struck by lightning, Anning. You little wretch, if it weren't for your cowardice, would I be paralyzed? You treat your own mother this way, you'll go to hell." I simply blocked her out as if I couldn't hear. Her rage had nowhere to go. and she was almost spitting blood in frustration. As expected, my father's attitude was just as I anticipated. Initially, he was patient and comforting, but soon enough, his true nature showed, and he became impatient, yelling loudly at her, "Shut your mouth. Neither Ning Ning nor I owe you anything. It was your own decision to go out shopping. And you have only yourself to blame for the consequences." Then, he found a reliable caregiver for her and stayed as far away as possible. That was something I couldn't accept. I deliberately fired the competent caregiver and went through numerous agencies until I found Zhang Chunhua, the caregiver who abused me in my previous life. Initially, she was reluctant to care for a paralyzed patient because she was used to being lazy and often got fired for it. But she couldn't refuse the high salary I offered. Zhang Chunhua seemed honest and dutiful on the surface, but only I knew how psychologically twisted she was behind her facade. Any slight dissatisfaction with her care would result in a beating. I wanted to tell my mother about her crimes, but every time I tried, she just accused me of being difficult and making trouble out of nothing. If that was the case, I was ready to let her experience whether I was really making trouble out of nothing. Meanwhile, I spent my days lamenting to my dad. In other families, kids have their mothers with them, but my mom can only lie in bed, and she smells bad too. I feel so embarrassed. I repeated to my dad the words my mother had once said, deliberately leaving the bedroom door open for her to hear. Immediately, curses came from the bedroom. "You heartless dogs, I'm not dead yet, and you despise me like this." Ah, her screams were piercing. My dad and I tacitly ignored her. And then I shyly told my dad, "I like Auntie Liu. I wish she were my mom." My dad's look changed instantly. "Do you really think so?" I nodded timidly, and seeing my response, his eyes sparkled. I knew then that I had him figured out. Liu was my dad's first love and the woman my mother despised the most in her life, since in my previous life my mother had brought home my most disliked cousin, Zhulei, and treated her like her own daughter. This life, I decided to learn from her and bring home her most despised rival to treat as my own mother. My dad indeed had never stopped thinking about Liu. I had only mentioned her briefly, and within a few days, he started inviting Liu to our home often under the guise of work. I was very pleased with my dad's efficiency and greeted Liu with a smile. "Hello, Auntie," but she instinctively stepped back a few steps. She looked at me defensively. "What do you want to do?" She avoided me as if I were a catastrophic flood or a ferocious beast. I wasn't surprised by her reaction. Growing up, I always listened to my mom, who disliked Liu. Behind her back, she would often call her names like Vixen or Little Temptress, accusing her of trying to steal my dad away and making me a fatherless child. So, I disliked her too. Liu worked at my dad's company, and whenever I saw her there, I took pleasure in making things difficult for her. I often left her blushing with embarrassment from my scolding, yet, because of my dad, she never dared to confront me and always found me a headache. I always thought she hated me deeply, but to my surprise, after I became paralyzed in my previous life, she was the only one who pitied me and occasionally visited. She even persuaded my dad to give me a grander funeral after I died. To her, these actions might have been simple gestures, but for me, they were the only light during those darkest days. I smiled at her and said, "Auntie, don't worry, I won't bully you anymore." Liu still looked at me with suspicion, probably thinking I was plotting an even bigger scheme against her, but there was no rush. In time, I would show her my goodwill. In the months that followed, we got along very well, and her wariness towards me completely dissolved. Sometimes when the three of us went out together, people would mistake Liu for my real mother. Interestingly enough, Liu and I shared a slight resemblance, which made us look like mother and daughter. Whenever someone mentioned this, my dad's expression would flicker with an unspoken emotion. But just as we were enjoying ourselves, my mother's ordeal was just beginning. She was forced to listen to our laughter and joyful conversations from her bedroom and endure the cruelty of the caretaker. Li Chunhua. I had secretly installed a camera in her room and often saw Li Chunhua violently pulling my mom's hair and smashing her head against the bed. If my mom refused to eat, Li Chunhua would forcibly pry her mouth open and shove food in. "You're disabled. What high ground do you think you're on? The food is just a bit spoiled. Don't trouble me to make it again, just eat it." Once the proudest person, she now resembled an abused stray dog, tortured beyond her limits. She begged me for help and accused Li Chunhua of her brutality, but I just told her impatiently, "Stop making trouble. Do you know how hard it is to find a caretaker for someone disabled like you? Can you stop causing problems for Dad and me? It's just your paranoia because of your paralysis. Auntie Li is so good, can't you be more positive?" I sighed. "Ah, you're really a curse on me and Dad. We must be really unlucky." I was throwing back at her the exact words she used to say to me, furious. My mom nearly choked. you little wretch, I am your real mother, and you call me a curse, I could kill you. Auntie Lee may be good, but she's not your real mom, you blind and heartless fool. She lunged at me with her hands, but lacking any strength, she just fell off the bed. I let her thrash about on the floor, not even sparing her a glance, just as she had done to me in the past life. Then, deliberately provoking her, I instructed Li Chunhua in a clear, measured tone, keep her quiet. Auntie Lee is coming over to celebrate my birthday, make sure she doesn't ruin our family of three's mood. Li Chunhua quickly nodded in agreement, promising repeatedly not to let my mom disturb us. I turned and walked out, leaving my mom raging behind me. She pointed at me and demanded, what did you say, you little wretch? Who are you calling a family of three? Have you no conscience? Are those even human words to say? I am your real mother. I simply shut the door behind me, not giving her a second glance. My real mother. I clearly remember that on this day in my past life, my cousin Zhulei came to visit us. My mother was ecstatic and personally cooked a lavish dinner for her. She even made a special trip to my room to instruct Li Chunhua to make sure the so-called bad luck charm, didn't dampen the spirits of their family gathering. At that time, I was in bed eating leftovers, listening to their laughter and joy. Wanting to cry, but Li Chunhua stuffed a cloth in my mouth. When my cousin heard my sobbing, she asked my mother what that sound was, but my mother dismissed it as the family dog being disobedient. And now, what I'm doing is merely learning from her. I closed the door, shutting out her cries of distress. Just as I walked into the living room, the doorbell rang. Glancing at the calendar, I guessed it was my opportunistic cousin at the door. In my past life, I suffered endlessly at her hands. But this life is different. I'm curious to see what tricks she might try. When my father heard the long ringing of the doorbell, thinking no one was in the living room, he came down to answer it himself. Zhulei, seeing that it wasn't my mother who opened the door, paused in confusion and muttered softly, why is it different from before? Could I have remembered wrongly? Then timidly, she said, hello, uncle, I'm your wife's niece. You might not have met me before, my name is Zhulei, niece. My father was puzzled. After all, everyone from my mother's family had passed away, and he had never heard of any living relatives. Actually, I always found it strange in my previous life. Zhulei seemed to appear out of nowhere, as my mother had never mentioned her, but she looked so much like my mother. Clearly there was a blood relationship. My father didn't probe further, but now that I think about it, it really is mysterious. I reminded my father, Mom doesn't have any nieces. She was clearly an orphan. Dad, this person must be a scammer. My father then looked at her with suspicion. I've never heard my wife mention having any nieces. Are you sure you're not mistaken? Zhulei replied with a look of hurt. I'm not a scammer, uncle. Please believe me. May I come in and explain slowly? No. Before my father could respond, I stepped forward and spoke first, covering my nose in disgust. Dad, why is she so dirty? Is she a beggar? Let's not let her in, or she'll dirty our newly laid carpet. Zhulei heard my words, clenched her teeth in anger. Who are you calling a beggar? Then, recognizing my face, she was as surprised as if she had seen a ghost. She took a couple of steps back, pointing at me with a trembling voice. Are you Anning? Yes. How do you know my name? I pinched the hem of my skirt, looking down at her haughtily, like a princess scrutinizing her servant, just like the way she used to look at me in my past life. Zhulei rushed up to me in disbelief, then stared intently at my legs. You were supposed to be paralyzed at this time. Why are you perfectly fine now? Where is my aunt? I want to see her. At that moment, I realized, Zhulei had also been reborn. My father saw her grabbing my arm and pushed her aside. What on earth are you raving about? Paralysis? Are you cursing my precious daughter? Dare to harm my daughter and you'll have me to deal with. Zhulei, used to bullying me in the past life, was still adjusting to the changes in this life. Hearing my father scolding, she looked up at him incredulously and protested. Dad, why are you speaking to me like this? I am Lei. You used to say I was the sweetest girl in the world. Why have you changed? Unfortunately, this isn't the past life anymore. In my father's eyes, there's only me, his daughter. He looked at her as if she were insane. Are you out of your mind? Who do you think your father is? I can't understand a word you're saying. I looked at her with pity. She must be mentally ill, maybe even escaped from an asylum. My attitude only agitated her further. Shut up. You have no say in this house. No, something must be wrong. Where is my aunt? I need to see her. Zhulei obviously couldn't face reality and insisted on seeing my mother. Impatiently, my father pointed towards the bedroom. Are you sick? It's my daughter's home. She can say whatever she wants. Your aunt is lying inside. Go see her if you want. But don't say I didn't warn you. Your aunt is mad now, and if she hurts you, It's not our responsibility. Zhulei was hurt by my father's attitude, but at that moment, she couldn't care less and ran straight into the bedroom where my mother was. I know you don't remember the past, uncle, but it's not your fault. I'll have my aunt explain who I am later, and then you'll like me again. Don't worry, I won't be mad at you, but I don't like this, Anning. You can only have me as your daughter, and you will have to drive her out later. My father was dumbfounded and didn't even know how to respond. After all, who can reason with a mad person? She confidently pushed open the bedroom door, full of anticipation. Only to see my mother had just wet the bed and was being slapped by Li Chunhua. Li Chunhua, seeing us enter, awkwardly withdrew her hand, but seeing that neither my father nor I reprimanded her, she regained her confidence. Zhulei, however, collapsed. Ah, how could this be? She screamed, pulling Li Chunhua away, disbelievingly staring at my mother. Are you really my aunt? No, how could you turn into this? My mother had aged a lot after the car accident. Looking nothing like her former graceful self, Zhulei struggled to reconcile this image with the aunt she knew from before. Because my mom had a car accident, that's why she looks like this now. Didn't you have something to say to her? Then say it quickly. Seeing Zhulei confused, I kindly explained. When my mother saw Zhulei, she suddenly became spirited, tearfully looking at her. Lei, you finally came to see your aunt. I've missed you so much. Please save me. They are all bad people trying to kill me. My mother reached out to touch Zhulei's face, but her dirty hand, even stained with urine, hadn't touched Zhulei when she screamed and dodged away. No, you're lying. My aunt is beautiful and elegant. How could she look like this? My mother had hoped Zhulei would take good care of her and that they could live well from now on. But hearing Zhulei's words, the hope in her eyes shattered. Lei, I really am your aunt. Zhulei collapsed to the ground, muttering to herself, no, something must be wrong. Why has it turned out like this? Why? I watched her coldly from above. Then, the next moment, Zhulei looked up at me. She stood up, ran to me, and grabbed my hands accusingly. Did you do something? Why isn't it you who's paralyzed but my aunt? What did you do? I explained. Nobody did anything. It was a truck that malfunctioned and hit my mom, making her like this. Dad and I are also very upset, angrily. She cursed at me. You didn't save her. You're her daughter. You wretch. You ruined everything. I'm going to kill you, she exclaimed. Before I could even respond, my dad stepped in to defend me. You lunatic, cursing my precious daughter again. Get out now. You're not welcome here. My dad pried Zhulei's hand off me and dragged her all the way to the front door, intending to throw her out. Throughout, Zhulei tried to convince my dad. You'll regret kicking me out. You'll grow to love me very much, and I'll be your only beloved daughter. Unfortunately, my dad didn't have the memories of a past life and simply thought she was mentally ill. What are you even talking about? You're crazy. Get out now, or I'll call the police. Zhulei was chased out but lingered at our doorstep, refusing to leave. Later, it started raining, and she was drenched through. The next morning, as my dad was preparing to leave for work, he opened the door to find a disheveled Zhulei. After a night to cool off, she seemed to have accepted reality. She no longer spoke of past lives but instead pleaded pitifully, Uncle, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking straight yesterday, but please, could you take me in for the sake of the many years you've been married to my aunt? I really have nowhere else to go. Although Zhulei was not particularly attractive, she was still a young girl. Added to that, although my dad was growing tired of my mom, he still harbored some old affections deep down. He hesitated for a moment but ultimately nodded in agreement. Fine, you can stay, but don't cause any trouble, or I'll kick you out at any time. But Zhulei didn't hear my dad's warning. She only caught the first part. Then she looked at me with a provocative smile. It was as if her smile said, see, even if we start over, you're still no match for me. I ignored her provocation, rubbed my sleepy eyes, and pointed at her, asking my dad, Dad, are you planning to keep her as a servant? Perfect, I need a maid, and you're so kind. I deliberately used language that was demeaning. Zhulei was easily provoked by my words. What are you talking about? Who is your? Unfortunately, she couldn't finish her sentence before my dad spoke up. Right, you can just tell her to do whatever needs to be done, since she's staying here for free. It can be her rent. Zhulei's eyes widened, frozen in place. Clearly, she thought that by staying here, she could live a pampered life like in her past life. The huge disparity stunned her momentarily. What? You don't want to? Hearing my words, my dad frowned. Since you're unwilling, we won't force you. You can leave. No, I'm willing, very willing. I nodded in satisfaction, walked over to her, sat down on a stool in front of her, and stretched out my foot, put on my shoes. Zhulei looked as if she had been greatly insulted, her expression uglier than if her own mother had died. seeing her furious reaction, I couldn't help but laugh. So, you can't take it anymore. But there are more embarrassing things yet to come. This weekend, I invited some classmates over to my house. These classmates were also friends with Zhu in her past life, and they got along well. I thought having them around would double her humiliation. To ensure Zhu felt sufficiently embarrassed, I made sure she served us up close. My classmates and I gathered around the dining table. Zhu stood behind us, ready to serve tea and water. I wonder how she felt seeing the people who were so close to her in her past life. What would it feel like to perceive oneself as a servant now? Someone asked. Who is this? My servant, I said nonchalantly. Zhu face turned red with embarrassment when she heard the word servant. As if she had been deeply humiliated, but this was just the beginning. Fill up my glass, demanded Zhou Lin, the most handsome guy at school, looking impatiently at Zhu and Ning. Your maid is not well trained, the glass is empty, and she doesn't even take the initiative to refill it. Don't be too kind, he continued. Some people are just born to be trampled on. The nicer you are to them, the more they'll take advantage of you. Humiliated, Zhu stepped forward to pour the wine but, overwhelmed by emotion, spilled it all over the table. Zhou Lin cursed under his breath, then a sleazy smile spread across his face, clearly plotting something sinister. As I expected, he next said, this wine is very expensive, it can't be wasted, lick it up from the table and the floor. Quickly, Zhu face was filled with sorrow, and I knew she couldn't take it anymore. In a past life, Zhou Lin had been devoted to Zhu. He had fallen in love with her at first sight and had even humiliated me, who was paralyzed, repeatedly for her sake. I remember him saying that I, confined to a wheelchair, looked like a disgusting dead dog. Back then, I thought his feelings for Zhu were genuine, but now, seeing them reunite in this life without her dazzling status, the love at first sight was nowhere to be seen. How ironic. Zhu had been able to endure until now, but after hearing his cruel words, she couldn't hold back any longer. With tears brimming in her eyes, she looked at Zhou Lin and said, you used to say that you would always treat me well, whether I loved you or not. Why are you bullying me like this now? Zhou Lin was stunned by her question and took a long time to regain his composure. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? I don't even know you, and you're talking about love. Look at yourself, so pitiful, and you don't even dare to look in the mirror. But Zhu remained engulfed in her sadness, unwilling to step out of it. She confronted the other students present. I was supposed to be your best friend, and Ning is a fake. I am the real daughter of the Yin family. She must be crazy, right? Has she been reading too many novels and started taking her fantasies for reality? The students said, looking at her as if she were mentally ill. Humiliated, she turned and wanted to flee to the basement where she lived to cry. I reminded her. You can't cry now. We still need you to serve us. If you don't stay here, I'll tell Dad to kick you out. Hearing my words, Zhu stopped in her tracks, her teeth grinding audibly, but she couldn't change her situation. To avoid being thrown out, she had to come and serve me obediently. Watching her angry expression, I could only sneer. This was the treatment she deserved. In a previous life, I believed in familial love and let her take advantage of me and enjoy a fortune that wasn't hers. To think she believed she was entitled to it was utterly ludicrous. Then, she numbly continued to serve us tea and water, her eyes seemingly filled with immense hatred. When everyone had left, I was about to return to my room to rest, but suddenly, Zhu stopped me. She looked at me for a long time before finally speaking. You've been reborn too, haven't you? I looked up, meeting her resentful gaze. Zhu said word by word. I thought it was strange before, but now I'm sure of it. I'm not the only one who's been reborn, right? So, in this life, it was your aunt who was in the car accident, not you. I lifted my head and looked down at her. You're only realizing this now. You're even more foolish than I thought. But what can you change by knowing? You're still not even fit to carry my shoes. My words struck a nerve, and she began to curse at me furiously. Bitch, I trampled you underfoot in our previous life, and I can do it again in this life. I'm going to kill you right now. She rushed over and grabbed my neck. So what if you've been reborn? All of this belongs to me, and you, bitch, deserve to die. She squeezed hard, clearly intent on killing me. However, I chose not to struggle because I saw my father returning with Liu. As they entered the room, they were shocked by the scene before them. Then my father rushed over and kicked Zhu aside. Zhu was knocked about a meter away and collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. Liu was terrified and kept comforting me. I gave her a reassuring smile, which calmed her down somewhat. Then I whispered to her, "Is everything taken care of?" She nodded confidently, indicating that everything was in order, and my long-standing anxiety finally eased. After a while, Zhu Lei recovered and managed to stagger to her feet. She screamed at my father, "Dad, I'm your precious daughter. This bitch hates you. In her previous life, you treated her poorly. So she tried everything to kill you." My father, annoyed, furrowed his brows. "You're crazy, spouting nonsense again. I'm not your father. I only have one daughter, Anning. If you want to go around claiming fathers, please find someone else. But for now, you need to stay at the police station." As soon as he finished speaking, police sirens sounded outside. The police had arrived. Zhu Lei looked at my father incredulously. "You actually called the police to arrest me?" My father ignored her. And she continued to rant, "You will regret this decision, and I will not forgive you easily." Then she turned to me with a sinister smile. "Don't be too smug, you never know who will have the last laugh." With those final words, Zhu Lei was taken away by the police. Her smile sent shivers down my spine. In the years that followed, Zhu Lei never reappeared in our lives, but whenever I thought of her creepy smile, I felt uneasy. To be safe, I hired a private detective to follow her. Everything seemed normal. Just when I let my guard down, she reappeared. I was out shopping with my father and Liu when Zhu Lei suddenly appeared, her face grim. "We meet again." She looked at me with a strange smile. "Do you remember what I said the last time we met?" I avoided her gaze and pondered, while my father impatiently said, "Didn't you have enough of the detention center last time? Keep acting crazy, and I'll send you back. Move aside, you lunatic." Despite being hurt by his words, Zhu Lei didn't react violently. Instead, she stepped closer, patted my father on the shoulder, and whispered in his ear, "Daddy, I've suffered too much. Please come back and protect me." Madwoman. My father pushed her away and left with me and Liu. We didn't dwell on the incident. But that evening, my father began to suffer agonizing headaches. We rushed him to the hospital overnight. All the examinations showed no issues, yet my father remained in a deep sleep, showing no signs of waking. After 3 days and nights of unconsciousness, he finally woke up on the 4th day. Seeing his eyes open, Liu and I rushed over. "Dad, you're finally awake. You had us worried." But my father looked at me indifferently and then asked, "Where is Lei Lei? What have you done to her?" Liu was stunned. Seeing my father's abnormal behavior, I instantly realized what was happening. Somehow, thanks to what Zhu Lei had done, my father had been reborn. As Liu and I exchanged puzzled looks, Zhu Lei suddenly appeared out of nowhere. She rushed to my father's bedside, hugged him, and cried, "Dad, you're finally back. Lei Lei has suffered a lot while you were gone." Then she turned her gaze towards me, her eyes gleaming with a triumphant smile. "It's time you returned what belongs to me." After my father was reborn, his attitude towards me plummeted. He kicked me out of the house, even claiming that Zhu Lei was his only daughter. The day I packed my things and left, Zhu Lei stood in front of me, gloating. "Enjoyed being the precious daughter for so long. Just keep that smirk to yourself, you shameless thief. But, I'm quite generous. If you kneel and beg, I might just keep you as my maid." Her righteous demeanor could fool anyone into thinking she was indeed my father's biological daughter, shameless to the core. At this point, arguing with her seemed pointless. I picked up my luggage and left home. A few minutes later, Liu came to pick me up. In the car, she looked at me with some relief and said, "After all the effort we've put into this for so long, it's finally time to wrap things up." In fact, Liu and I had been subtly undermining my father's authority over the years. Now, the incorporation was already under my control. My outwardly sweet demeanor and calling him dad was just a facade to deceive him. The main culprits behind my past misfortunes were indeed my mother and Zhu Lei, but this despicable accomplice, my father, would not escape responsibility. Those who wronged me, I would not let go. Poor Zhu Lei, solely focused on outdoing me for my father's affection, not realizing that I had no need for such trivial things. What I wanted was the power to control everything. The day Liu and I went to take over the company, we coincidentally ran into Zhu Lei delivering a lovingly prepared lunchbox for my father. Seeing me, she arrogantly asked, "Couldn't survive outside, so you've come to beg Dad and me to take you in?" "Excuse me, let our president in through." Liu stepped in front of me. "President in? You're actually calling her president in? Have you lost your mind? Don't forget you're just my dad's assistant. Even if my dad likes you, it's useless. You can't compare to me. Believe it or not, I can get Dad to fire you." Liu looked at her as if she were a mere jester. "You're not aware, and Ning now holds 80% of the company's shares, making her the largest shareholder." Zhu Lei's eyes widened, clearly struggling to digest this devastating news for her. She rushed towards me, grabbed my wrist, and demanded, "Impossible, how could this be? "You must have tricked me, right?" Despite her questions, the increasingly melancholic mood of my father in recent days had already given her a premonition. She just didn't want to face reality. Soon after, my father was taken away by the authorities for bribery, with the evidence provided by me. Poor Julie, after all her efforts and even sacrificing her body in deals with foreign sorcerers for my father's rebirth, found herself with nothing just as her good days were beginning. If she knew that I personally arranged that mage, I wonder if she'd hate me even more, wishing she could kill me. As for my father's rebirth, it was all orchestrated by me. After all, there's no fun in revenge if he doesn't know the truth. What I wanted was for him to be punished in his past life too. Later, Julie disappeared. I vaguely heard that she was deceived and taken to northern Myanmar. Unfortunately, she wasn't very attractive or smart, and didn't hold much high value. She always claimed she was the young mistress of the Yin family, believing someone would pay ransom for her. The scam group called the company, and it was Liu who answered. She coldly informed them that there was only one young mistress in the Yin family, who was currently busy handling company affairs. Angered by her words, the scammers sold her to a pig farm, where she was forced to continuously serve as a surrogate for wealthy people, constantly bearing children. When she finally lost her value, she was thrown into a shredder, ending her absurd life. Meanwhile, my father suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. Although his life was saved, he was left bedridden, dependent on others for care. I arranged for him and my mother to stay in the same room, letting them hurl insults and accusations at each other, while still having the nanny, Li Chunhua, take care of them. Li Chunhua truly excelled, and within a year, she had worn them down to near death. That's when I finally felt a sense of relief. And then I took out the family's surveillance footage and sent Li Chunhua straight to prison. Because of the severity of the case, Li Chunhua received a heavy sentence, finally receiving the punishment she deserved for abusing me in her past life. After settling these matters, I took a deep breath, changed into a fine dress, and prepared to welcome the public listing of our company. Li Yu, standing by,